Hey there, my meaty friends. This is Reed, aka CarnivorousChef. If it looks like I'm in a dungeon right now, don't worry, I'm not. I'm just in a dark garage. But anyways, in this video, I'm going to show you how to make a dip. I was kind of aiming it towards this big game. I don't know if I can actually say the name of it and be demonetized or not, so I'm just not going to say it. It's a football game that's happening in February that a lot of people want to watch. I had this recipe in mind just for like parties and things like that, and I thought it'd be a good one for that game. It's a super simple dip recipe, but I think people that aren't even on this diet will actually really enjoy this one. So if you end up making this and you bringing it to a party, I suggest bringing yourself some pork rinds and maybe finding some like cheap bread to cut thin and toast it to serve along with it. I think you'll really impress a lot of people. And before we start, I'm gonna get you to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And if you're interested in supporting it, there's a link down below to join as a channel member or join my Patreon community. To start this one, you'll need about 1 pound of shaved steak. If you can't find shaved steak, you can cut either ribeye or sirloin against the grain as thin as you can. And if you really want to go for it, steakums will be my last option, but it's also acceptable. This is some shaved steak that I get from Aldi, and it's usually rather large, so I'm going to have to give it a nice rough chop. And by rough, I mean wide cuts. We don't want this to turn into ground beef. Once it's chopped up, preheat a pan over medium-high for just a minute or two and add in all of your beef. We'll go ahead and season this up with about a half teaspoon of salt. Let this cook for about 3 minutes, mixing occasionally or until most of the pink from the meat is gone. Set aside and pull out a block of Swiss cheese. You can see that it's Swiss by the holes in it. Can you see it? I see it. Grate your cheese however you want, but I'm going to slap mine against a box grater and go to town. You'll want to grate the entire block. Set this aside and let's start assembling. Place an oven-safe pan over medium heat and add in an 8-ounce block of cream cheese. Season this up with 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika, 1 teaspoon of granulated onion, a half teaspoon of granulated garlic, and 1 teaspoon of salt. Start chopping all of this up and then have a brief panic because you think you're burning your cream cheese. Quickly, get the meat into the pan before... Okay, we're fine. Just breathe. When your meat gets into the pan, the little bit of moisture from it should help the cream cheese to melt a little quicker. Just keep mixing this around until you no longer see chunks of cream cheese. Once you're happy with how it looks, add in about 2/3 of your Swiss cheese and mix that in as well. Once it's mixed in, smooth out the top and add the rest of your Swiss cheese to it. Place this whole thing into an oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 11 to 14 minutes or until the Swiss cheese is nicely brown. Get this onto a tray alongside some of your favorite pork rinds and admire your work by giving it a taste. Creamy and beefy is an understatement here. If I was eating bread, I think I could slap this right into a hoagie roll and be fine with calling this a normal cheesesteak sandwich. But alas, I'm more than happy to enjoy it with my crunchy skins. Hey there, my meaty friends. This is Reed, aka CarnivorousChef. I saw a TikTok of someone making chips out of ground chicken, and my initial thought was to turn this into carnivore Doritos. But after looking through my list of videos, I ran across chicken parm. So instead of Doritos, how about I make some chicken parm nachos? Like, why not, right? I'll eventually do a video of the chicken parm the way it should be, but for now, you'll likely dig this. Here comes Gentry walking in with his big old fork. Sup, bud? Sorry, I won't look at you anymore. So the idea is pretty simple. Grinding chicken, or buying ground chicken in my case, and getting it as thin as possible to create chips. A quick note, start with some parchment paper on the table and not cling film. You'll be cooking it on parchment, and I now have the unfortunate job of flipping this later. So slap down your ground chicken and begin to knead it to the width of your parchment paper. It should be about the size of a half sheet pan. If you don't know what size that is, grab a standard cookie sheet and compare it to that. Just big rectangles, that's the goal. So the initial plan was to flatten this out between cling film, but I realized I don't want to cook plastic. I'm not trying to get high here. Here's the flip I dreaded, but I'm happy that it went well. I kept spreading this out till I remember there's a better way to do this. I bet you haven't seen one of these in a while. It's the perfect tool for flattening things out. I haven't made real dough in so long that I forgot rolling pins even exist. So roll this out pretty thin and just press it until it goes past the parchment. You can pull the excess off and fill in any empty spots you have. With 2 pounds of meat, I was left with about 3 ounces of excess. So, in the process of flipping, I somehow made the perfect seam for 2 sheet pans. You should be able to do this naturally since you started with parchment. You did start with parchment, right? Slide these 2 into your pans carefully. They likely won't break apart sliding them. If you recklessly slap yours down, comment below to let me know how it went. I season each of these up with a half teaspoon of salt, a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, a half teaspoon of garlic powder. Hey friend, I'm gonna need you to leave. And a half teaspoon of onion powder. Place these into your oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 176 degrees Celsius for 25 to 30 minutes or until crispy. I flipped mine for the last 5 minutes of cooking just to make sure the underside dried out a little as well. Chicken parm is usually topped with a red sauce, but we can do better. I basically took the elements of a marinara and made an Alfredo sauce with it. Place a pan over medium-high heat and add in 2 tablespoons of butter, then a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, a 1/2 teaspoon of granulated garlic, and a 1/2 teaspoon of red pepper flakes. Stir this around and toast your spices for about 30 seconds. The butter should be getting dark, and it's because the garlic is caramelizing. After that, add in 1 teaspoon of Italian seasoning and mix it around a little as well. Finally, add in 1 1/4 cup of heavy cream. Give this a titillating whisk. Reduce the heat to medium and allow to reduce until thickened. Just remember, cream loves to boil over, so don't leave it. Once thickened, turn the heat off and either pour in a 1/2 cup of grated Parmesan or grate over fresh Parmesan directly into the cream. 1 more titillating whisk and this should be good to go. Finally, add in about a 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt, but be sure to taste it. Add in more if you think it needs it, but a 1/2 teaspoon was perfect for my sauce. Set this aside and it's time to take these crispy babies out. They look like thin pork rinds, which is a good sign. Feel free to cut these however you want. Just know they may shatter, especially around the edges. I took my sheets and made triangular chips out of them, because, nachos. While cutting them up, I kept taking little bites of the shattered pieces. It's wild how much they feel like chips and dry chicken at the same time. The dry chicken part makes sense, but the chips part is still a bit wild, honestly. These are begging for some sort of dip, or marinara sauce. Feel free to use the same pan you cooked your chicken on for this part, but if you have a tiny sheet pan, it lets you stack everything up a bit higher. Place down some more parchment, then some chicken chips, shred over some low moisture mozzarella, and then some Parmesan. And finally, a little marinara. Repeat this until you're out of sauce, but do not skip this last and crucial step, which is grating over as much mozzarella and Parmesan that you're almost uncomfortable with. For me, I could have used the entire 1/2 pound of block of each, but I'm trying to show some moderation. Place these back into your oven at the same temperature for about 5 minutes or until everything is melted and has a nice color. I added a bit of chopped parsley out of the tradition of making my food look better. It's wholly unnecessary in my opinion as far as the flavor, but whatever, it looks nice. Let me take this first bite from a Patreon community. Not as good of a cheese pool as I was hoping for, but I was right about the sauce. The sauce plus these chips alone would have been straight up fire. The cheese just adds a bit of nuttiness and creaminess that I enjoy. You can add a bit of nuttiness and creaminess too by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Hey there my meaty friends, this is Reed aka CarnivorousChef, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to make pigs in a blanket. These are typically made with hot dogs wrapped in biscuit dough or croissant dough, but we can't have biscuit or a croissant dough, so today I'm going to make these with my tortilla recipe that I used to make enchiladas. It's very soft, a little bit crispy. Use an egg wash to make it a little bit shiny too. These are very easy to make. It's 3 ingredients in a blender along with your choice of hot dog, smoked sausage, whatever you want to use. Before we get started, I'm going to ask you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with everyone that you think might like it, but most of all, I hope you enjoy it. Okay, let's get started. For this recipe, you're going to have to make the critical decision of smoked sausage or hot dogs. I personally picked smoked sausage because hot dogs just aren't very good after the first one. I specifically chose Conecuh sausage for this. Dear Conecuh Sausage Company, if you ever want to sponsor a video, collaborate, or just show off your facility, please email me. It's in my About Me section. Sincerely, one hungry boy. Now, if you're going to use rope sausage like this, you can go with a few sizes. This is the old ding donger. It's a pretty aggressive move, but it'll allow anyone that's truly hungry to feel full. The next size down is going to be our half chub. This is the size I think of when having pigs in a blanket for dinner. And finally, the bashful Billy. Everyone has had those nasty little cocktail smokies covered in cheap biscuits before. Those are the best version for some reason, so I'll be making something similar. Cut your sausage to size and we can move on to our dough. For the dough, you'll need some eggs. Well, 3 to be exact. Set the other 2 aside for later purposes. To that, add in 3 ounces of ground pork rinds, and finally 3 ounces of mozzarella cheese. Blend this on low for about 2 minutes or until a dough ball is formed. Perfect. Bring some parchment paper over to your workstation along with some butter. This dough is very sticky, so I'll be using the butter to help the dough glide off my hands. Take about 1 tablespoon of your dough and press it into an oval on your parchment paper. Now lay your sausage or hot dog on top of it. Pick up your parchment paper and fold the dough to the other side. This dough does a great job at sealing, so you shouldn't have an issue with that. If there's any excess, just pull it off and put it into the next dough ball. Repeat this until all of your dough has been used up. I was able to get about 20 of these mini piggies. There's something about making finger foods like this that puts me into a deep trance. I only ever snap out of it when I'm on the last one. Now that we have all these wrapped up and ready to go, let's get it to shine with an egg wash. Simply crack an egg into a bowl and give it a pretty rigorous forking. If you have a brush each one with a little bit of egg. If not, you could be a caveman alongside me and use your fingers to brush the egg on. When they're all egged up, place them into an oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 to 12 minutes or until nicely golden brown. These turned out even better than I was expecting. I knew this dough would be a better fit than a wet batter, but adding a little bit of egg made it pop. If you're curious about the sauce on the side, don't be. I made it to dip these in, but even good chefs make mistakes. Which this sauce was a whole mistake. Sauce aside, these are really damn good. Good enough for me to suffer third-degree mouth burns. Excuse me while I go cool my tongue off. See y'all next time. Alright, here's the scenario. You get a phone call.
Hey man, we're meeting at the house to watch this cricket match.
Alright.
Everyone's hanging out and bringing snacks, and we'd love to have you come hang out.
Okay, I guess I'll come watch cricket.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of chips and dip, so bring something you can eat. I know you're on that funky ass diet.
Damn, what kind of food works with cricket matches? I guess I'll just do something Cajun? Everybody likes that. Good thing I'm already cutting up these scallions. So, chips and dip. What else do I have? Oh, cool, I have some andouille sausage. Let's get this diced nice and small. Cut some planks, like a lot of planks. Then matchsticks. And dice. Nice. I need to cook this, but I'd really like it to be crispy. Let's just see what we get with a medium heat for a while. What else do I have lying around? There we go. Cream cheese I forgot to put up yesterday. Good thing it's pretty stable. I'll go ahead and use both blocks as I don't really have a purpose for it right now. And let's add some Cajun flavors. Celery seed, some cayenne, smoked paprika, and that's all I've got. At least it tastes good. Garlic powder, onion powder, maybe some of those scallions, and a few dashes of crystal. I want this to be dippable even if it's cold. How about we add some warmed up chicken broth too? There we go. And then this andouille. It's like Rotel, but if I found it drinking a hand grenade on Bourbon Street. Alright, just give this a little mix. Damn, I'm gonna have to break out a whisk. There we go, much better. Let's get this into a nicer bowl. A little smoked paprika for contrast. Some more scallions for color. And why not some hot sauce flavored pork rinds? One final step before I head out, just to make sure, you know, it's up to par. Oh man, this is pretty good. I hope I don't eat all of it before I get to watch this game. I hope. Hey there, my meaty friends. This is Reed, aka CarnivorousChef, aka Boudin Boy. If you've seen my chicken cordon bleu meatball video, you might know that I ran a little contest on my Instagram. You should definitely go follow my Instagram because I plan on doing more of these. But people ran wild with it, and a few of the answers I got me thinking. Boudin balls is one of the first ones that struck me and made me wonder why I haven't even thought to make it. Maybe it's the rice, and the fact that I'm allergic to rice, that led me to completely disregard it. However, I felt the strongest urge to make them after reading that comment, so here's me doing that. To start, walk in with a soft wiggle, and then grab yourself some pork shoulder of some sort. I get these country style ribs because it's just pork shoulder cut up into strips. A lot of the times it won't even say pork shoulder, but it'll just say country style ribs. This is a great option if you don't feel like getting an entire pork shoulder. Anyways, let's get these fake ribs out and give them a very generous seasoning. This is almost 3 pounds of pork, and I used about a tablespoon of salt for all of it. Get every square inch coated because it definitely needs it. Throw this into an oven at 450 degrees Fahrenheit or 230 degrees Celsius. We want to let it get some good color there, so let it go for about 30 minutes in a convection oven or 40 minutes in a conventional oven. In the meantime, let's get our main flavors together. I'll be avoiding fresh veggies for the obvious reasons, and instead opt for dried spices. But feel free to do whatever you want here. In a bowl, you'll want to add in a quarter cup of smoked paprika, 1 tablespoon of celery salt, 1.5 tablespoons of granulated garlic, 1 tablespoon of granulated onion, 1 teaspoon of ground cayenne pepper, and finally a quarter teaspoon of black pepper. Give that a hot whisking and then stick your face in it and breathe through. Oh yeah, that's good. Set that aside while we deal with our now well roasted pork. Add in 4 cups of water or stock of your choice, as well as 3 tablespoons of your newly made spice mixture. We want this braised semi-low and semi-slow, so cover it very tightly with aluminum foil and place it back into your oven. However, this time set your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 175 degrees Celsius. Let it cook for an hour and 15 minutes in convection oven or an hour and a half in a conventional oven. While that's in the oven again, we could take care of our livers. Place a pan over medium-high heat along with 2 tablespoons of ghee or butter. I added in a half pound of chicken livers and gave them a hard sear. Once I finally flipped them, I decided to add in about a tablespoon of the Cajun spice we made earlier. Flip these occasionally and cook until they're about medium. Once they're, set them aside, and it's finally time to pull out our pork. It should be nicely falling apart tender. Remove the pork from the pan, reserving the braising liquid. We're about to be grinding this, so we want to give this a rough chop. Also, if you have a grinder, use the largest grinding plate you have. I did a review on this grinder, but nobody seemed to care, and if you want to see that review, I'll post the link to the video down in the description. Grind or chop up all of your little porky cubes, followed by your chicken livers. What you're looking for is a loose yet fine texture on the pork, and the liver should be creamy. Now we've got that all ground up, let's fortify it. Add in 2 teaspoons of the only hot sauce I had on hand, along with 2 teaspoons of salt, 2 teaspoons of our spice mix, about 2 tablespoons of pork rinds, and 1 egg as a binder, and finally about a 1/3 cup of our braising liquid. Thoroughly mix this by hand before throwing it into our fridge for about an hour to chill out. Once out, we can finally bread these puppies, little boudin puppies. Grab a sheet tray and spread out some of the pork rinds. Make a meatball by any means necessary. I'm using a cookie dough scoop to make mine much less of a hassle. Roll it around on the pork rinds and then press it in. Complete the round shape based on your OCD needs. Finish up with the rest of your ingredients until you're done. And once you're done making these, about 24 to 30 of them, place them back into your oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 175 degrees Celsius for 15 to 20 minutes or until crispy on the outside. Let's get these quickly plated up because I'm excited to take this first bite, which is for my Patreon community. You should join us if you want to be a part of the Cool Kids Club. I'm super happy about putting these balls in my mouth. Holy shit, these are good. Hey there, my meaty friends. This is Reed, aka CarnivorousChef. In today's video, I'm going to show you something that it was just kind of an idea that I was going to do at the restaurant with some leftover product. So I decided to do it myself at home to see what it would be like first. This is a fried Reuben. I wanted it to be kind of like a cheese stick almost, but also filled with meat. What I've achieved was really good. Is it actually better than a Reuben? Well, why don't you wait till the end to find out. I do have 2 separate recipes for this. They're pretty much the same. One just adds sauerkraut to those people that actually eat sauerkraut. If you're not one of those people, I totally understand, so don't be too upset about it. A Reuben sandwich has some basics that I like to follow. Corned beef, Swiss cheese, sauerkraut. There's a dressing usually, Russian or Thousand Island for Americans, but I'm going to forgo the dressing for this video. Here, I'm going to be using about 6 ounces of deli sliced corned beef in each pile. You can absolutely cook your own corned beef. Since this is going to be blended, I decided this would be sufficient. Give this a rough chop. Next up, we're going to need some Swiss. See the holes? That's Swiss. I have 2 different piles here because I'm going to be making 2 different versions of this fried Reuben. One version will be just meat and cheese, and the other will have some added sauerkraut. To the meat and cheese pile, you'll want to add 4 ounces or 1 cup of Swiss cheese that's been shredded. For the sauerkraut folk, you'll want 2 ounces or a half cup of Swiss cheese that's been shredded. And that's because you're going to be bulking this up with about a half cup of sauerkraut. Knowing what I know now, squeeze out as much liquid out of your fermented cabbage before processing this. Speaking of processing, simply add your ingredients into a food processor or blender along with 1 egg and process for about 1 minute. This is the texture you're looking for. It is a bit crumbly. This is okay because when we go to cook these, the cheese will act as a glue to keep them together. The kraut version is pretty much the same, but a bit more moist. The next step is to make some patties. I got about 4 patties per recipe. Grab about 2.5 ounces of your mixture and press firmly together. Use the plate to help shape these if you need to. We will be freezing these to help us later on when we go to batter them. Throw these beefy little lovers into the freezer for about 30 minutes or until they're slightly firm. After that time, we can set up our dredging station. Egg battle 2 eggs into your bowl and add in about a half cup of milk. Really fork this one. Next up, I added some ground pork rinds to a plate and began breading. Egg wash followed by pressing in the pork rinds. Now, I like Reuben's rye bread. We can achieve this flavor here if you add in some chopped up caraway seed or ground pork rind crumbs. But I know how the community feels about seeds. Hell, I kind of feel the same. But if you want to, and for the sake of flavor, feel free to add in about a half teaspoon of caraway seeds per cup of pork rinds. We will be pan frying these puppies. Place a pan over medium heat with about 1 1/4 cups of fat of your choice. I think lard or tallow would be the best option here. I didn't have any, so I went with what I had. Butter and some added olive oil to keep it from burning. Place these into your pan and cook them for about 4 to 5 minutes per side, flipping occasionally. They won't get very firm in the pan, but as you pull them out to drain, the cheese and the egg will help them solidify a bit. To be honest, I wasn't expecting that sexy of a cheese pull. And let's check the unholy non-carnivore Ketovore version. A bit less of a cheese pull, but that's expected considering we swapped half the volume with fermented cabbage. But it is still delicious. Honestly, this is nearly on par with an actual Reuben sandwich. Nothing will ever actually beat a Reuben, but this is really close. Hey there, my meaty friends. This is Reed, aka CarnivorousChef. This year has been absolute chaos with the amount of catering gigs I've received. I don't often get requests for finger foods, but when I do, I usually add a pinwheel to the list just because it's an easy option, and you can make a lot of variations. So I figure it's about time to offer that variety to you. To get started, we need some ground pork rinds. I usually weigh my pork rinds, but this part of the recipe is from my friend Anita, or Ketogenic Woman. Go check out her channel, it'll be linked below. Set those skins aside, and up next we will be making a spread. I added 8 ounces of cream cheese and a quarter cup of full-fat Greek yogurt to a blender. I season this up with a half teaspoon of black pepper and a half teaspoon of salt. Give this a blend for about 1 minute or until it's silky smooth. You should definitely give it a little lick. Put this in a bowl and set aside while we get our pasta dough tortilla dough pastilla made up. Per Anita's instructions, get a blender or food processor and add in 3 eggs, 4 tablespoons or 2 ounces of cream cheese, 3 tablespoons of ground pork rinds, and 1 tablespoon of grated Parmesan cheese. Give this a blend for about a minute or until homogeneous. It'll be quite liquidy, but that's perfectly fine. That's liquid magic you're looking at. Pour this onto a silicone mat lined baking sheet. You can also use parchment paper here. Then place it into an oven that's set to 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about 10 to 12 minutes or until the top of the sheet is set. Carefully remove and let cool for a few minutes. I'm impressed every time I make this. I'll be making 2 different pinwheels here, so I'll cut this down the middle. I will also go ahead and give these a preemptive roll just in case they stiffen up later and decide they want to crack. After a couple of minutes like this, we can start the assembly. The first thing we should do is put down 3 to 4 tablespoons of our spread and smooth it edge to edge. I can hear the comments already. What the hell is the green stuff on that plate? It's basil, you animals. You don't have to use it if you don't want to. I'm not coming down to the Burger King to slap the dicks out of your mouth, so leave me and my basil alone. The process is quite simple. Just lay down ingredients in layers and roll it up. This pepperoni and basil combo is perfect. After you've rolled it up, flip it so that the seam side is up. Place a toothpick at both ends. Now, use your index finger to space toothpicks evenly. We can finally cut these through the middle of each toothpick spot. Now that is a hypnotic sight. Let's go ahead and repeat similar steps for the second one. This one is simply a ham and Swiss pinwheel. I had the idea in the middle of filming to add some ground pork rinds to the cream cheese. I was feeling nostalgic about those after-pull sandwiches smashed with potato chips, and this did a nice job filling that nostalgia hole. If you get a little overzealous stuffing your pinwheel, you might get a tear like I did, but no worries. Our spread acts like a glue. Follow the exact same toothpick procedure as before and slice. This was minimal effort and it looks fantastic. I feel like these would be a great meal prep option for a few days of cold lunches at work. Maybe even a snack for your kids. No matter what you do with them, just remember to fill your nostalgia hole from time to time. Hey there, my meaty friends. This is Reed, aka CarnivorousChef. Jalapeno poppers. One of the ultimate trash food, right? What if I told you we can make a trash food a carnivore person's treat? Well, that's what I'm telling you. I'm also telling you that if you like this video and subscribe to the channel, you'll receive 1 year of good luck. Gather around the campfire and prepare yourself for a story on how to make these tasty morsels. I'm not going to sit here and tell you to stuff jalapenos with ground beef and cream cheese and call it carnivore. I mean, I should, just because I'd love to read the comments about how it's not. Instead, I'll create the vessel to hold the cream cheese and a bit of jalapeno. Grab yourself an amount of foil and start balling them into the shape of halved jalapenos. Don't eat these as they'll be spicy on your teeth and nut your tongue when you bite into them. For our replacement protein jalapeno, place 1 pound of ground beef into a bowl. Season that with 1 teaspoon of salt and a quarter teaspoon of black pepper. Give this a mix with your bare hands until homogeneous. Once mixed up, you're going to grab about 2 ounces of your seasoned meat and give it a gentle pressing. Drip this over your jalapeno mold and press in gently to shape around it. Pick it up, examine it. Mine was looking a bit girthy in spots, so I pulled a bit of the excess off. Once you've got all of these beefy pino molded, you can throw them into an oven at 375 degrees Fahrenheit for 5 to 7 minutes or until firm to the touch. Side note, there's enough beef here to make 8 of these shells, so proceed with the second round if you want more. Next up, grab a food processor. I pulled out my old friend 1.5 cup mini food processor and added in about 6 ounces of cream cheese and then follow that up with the star of the show, 1 jalapeno. If you do not want to consume jalapeno, that's totally understandable. Cream cheese and beef is awesome on its own, but if you do, process this until you get a light green and spicy cream cheese. Now we also have the predicament of fried versus bacon-wrapped jalapeno poppers. So I decided to do a few variants. If it's not obvious as to what to do next, have some strips of bacon ready and begin to fill your beefy pinos with your cream cheese. For your bacon wrap variations, just wrap it up the best you can. I do that by laying a strip down and folding it up. The other one we're doing will be a quote-unquote fried type, or normal, so these will just fill with cream cheese. While I try to hide my strip of snacking bacon for later, I'll let you know that you need to put these in the freezer for about 10 minutes just to let them firm up a little bit. While those are in the freezer, let's set up our standard breading station. Crack 2 eggs into a bowl and add in a quarter cup of heavy cream, half and half, or milk. Whisk this until homogeneous. Grab yourself a plate and lay out about 3 ounces or 1 bag of ground pork rinds. I like to season mine with a little black pepper, but you can leave these plain if you want to. After your 10 minutes are up, it's time to get breading. Using a wet hand, we'll start with a bacon wrap popper and drop it down into our milk wash. Coat that evenly and let the excess drip off before placing it into your pork rinds. Coat this evenly again and set that into a parchment-like baking sheet with the rest of his friends. Next up, grab a plain Jane beefy cheese boy and repeat the process. It's like a perfect little package of flavor that Guy Fieri would be proud of to call gangster. Place this into an oven at 375 degrees Fahrenheit. The quote-unquote normal breaded ones take about 7 to 9 minutes to get crispy, and both of the bacon-wrapped ones take about 15 to 17 minutes to get crispy. And they are done. Let's start off with the quote-unquote normal one. Crispy, creamy, beefy. Honestly, it's a great representation of a jalapeno popper. Next up, the bacon-wrapped. Rich and chewy from the bacon. I dig it, but it's borderline too rich. Finally, the breaded bacon-wrapped monstrosity. Again, rich and chewy, but the crunchy exterior helps you forget about how rich it is. All 3 of these were really tasty, but the winner in my book is the quote-unquote normal one. Try all 3 of these out and let me know what you think in the comments. See y'all next time. For this recipe, we're going to be making a good old-fashioned and non-triggering hamburger steak, otherwise known as taking a side of beef to Ground Town. To start, you'll need 8 ounces of ground beef because any worthwhile steak weighs at least a half pound. I get my beef from the Cost Plus store where they still have old school grinders, and I'll have to get rid of all these crevasses. If you're getting squared vacuum sealed ground beef, you won't have to do this part. Just squish and smash this together until you get a nice lumpy ball. Now we simply want to start pressing this out and straightening out the sides. That's right, build this beef up just to tear it back down, but like in a spinning motion. Do this for at least 30 seconds until your steak is perfectly symmetrical. You'll have to flip it a couple of times to achieve beefsteak perfection. Once you're happy, or just tired of doing it, with how it looks, season it up generously with salt and pepper. Be sure to roll the edges around on the excess plate of S&P, and don't forget to season the other side. Now we're going to do one of those quote-unquote restaurant hacks that restaurants don't usually do. Since this is a super thick burger, we want to give it some room to expand by putting a crater into the middle of it. Once you're done fondling the beef, get a heavy bottom pan over medium-high heat. Once the pan has started putting off wisps of smoke, place that patty flat side down and begin to sear. We're not going to be cooking this steak on the burner the entire time, so while we're searing, get the oven preheating 325 degrees Fahrenheit. There's no real set time for the searing, but what I like to see is the crust starting to creep up the side before flipping. This took me about 4 minutes to achieve. Just a side note, my butane was running out and I didn't know it, so I had a small flame. I would have had a much better crust if I had realized this, but that's okay. Sear the other side for about the same time. I gave it one more flip before slinging the whole pan into the oven. I was shooting for a medium because medium rare ground beef is disgusting. I let mine cook for an additional 6 minutes before removing from the oven. And now we're left these little bits of beef stuck to the pan known as fond. We want to remove this to make our sauce, and the best way to do that is with some form of liquid. I went in with about 3/4 cups of beef stock and began scraping the bottom. I also turned the heat back on to medium. I want to get this stock reduced by at least half, and while it's reducing, I want to flavor it up with some optional garlic powder. About an 1/8 teaspoon should be enough. Once your beef stock has reduced down and all of that tasty fond has been disconnected from the pan, we can add about 1/3 of a cup of heavy cream and reduce again. Heavy cream is the cheat code to thick and creamy sauces without a bunch of ingredients. Once you can pull the sauce with your spatula across the pan like this, it is finished. Give it one last taste for salt and pepper and set aside and we can plate up this hamburger steak. Take your rested patty, which is definitely no longer medium. Thank you, carryover cooking. And top that with your luscious sauce. I grew up with hamburger steaks and there are a lot of dirty things I would do to have one. Like say, taking a side of beef to Ground Town. Let me get a finger of the sauce first. Oh yeah, passes the finger test. Now, let me grab a spoon and give this thing an actual taste. That's definitely not medium. If you look closely, you'll see something special. A juicy steak made of ground beef and simple sauce made of 3 ingredients. If you don't think that's special, then go ahead and keep living your convoluted life. Hey there, my meaty friends. This is Reed, aka CarnivorousChef. If you remember the egg pudding trend of 2021, then this may look a little familiar. It's similar, but is really just a basic custard we've been making. This technique is super simple and can be done in many different ways. If you're lactose intolerant, you can do this with bone broth as well. If this video gets 100 likes, I'll make another custard video without dairy. Anyways, let's get started. For this base recipe, you'll need the following: whole milk, heavy cream, and eggs. In a mixing bowl, crack in 1 whole egg and 1 egg yolk. Once you get your eggs cracked in, add in 1 cup of whole milk and 1/4 cup of heavy cream. The last ingredient you'll need here is a pinch of salt. You'll use the salt even if you're making a sweet custard because season your food, please. Whisk this up and voila, a basic custard. Today I'm making a breakfast custard and a vanilla custard. For the breakfast custard, add in 2 tablespoons of grated Parmesan cheese and 2 tablespoons of sharp cheddar. Give this a whisk and set it aside before remembering to add in a pinch of extra salt and a little pepper. To cook this, we'll need to set up a bain-marie. Grab a deep baking dish and place a towel down to keep our cups from sliding around. For today's custards, I'll be using soup cups because I don't have any ramekins available. You can do this in any oven-safe container, honestly. Butter up your vessels just to make sure these bad boys don't stick. Ladle in your custard and drop in some cooked and crumbled bacon. Grab a kettle of hot water and pour in about 1 inch up the side of the dish. Let's carefully transfer this into an oven set to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and let it cook for about 30 to 35 minutes or until a toothpick inserted comes out clean. Now let's make this vanilla custard. Honestly, this one's just the base custard recipe with some vanilla extract added in. Super simple, right? Let's go through this one quickly so I don't bore you with the exact same thing I did 1 minute and 43 seconds ago. So to your base custard recipe, add in 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, and that's it. Don't waste your B-roll either, so pour that water into your pan carefully. You just don't want water in your custard because it's custard and not watered. Now let's pull these out and let them cool down and rest for about 15 minutes. They should still be a bit jiggly, but not flowing with liquid. That's how you know they're perfect. This jello-like texture is what you're going for. Let's take this first bite for my Patreon community. If you're interested in joining and supporting the channel, the link is in the description below. Okay, the breakfast custard is f***ing delicious, and I'm already looking forward to make a similar version already. This vanilla custard is also fantastic. I've made custards before, but they had a pile of sugar in them in the past. No longer. Hey everyone, welcome to Down South Carnivore Episode 1. I wanted to use this series as an attempt to test my creativity and knowledge of food and combine that with the fact that I'm from the South and have eaten basically all the Southern food you can think of. The South includes a lot of vegetables and starches in their food, so there will be a lot of things that I won't be willing to do, but there may be a few things I'll throw in to surprise you. The goal is to keep it as carnivore or as carnivore-ish as possible. If you see me falling down the trail of cauliflower, mashed potatoes, or similar, please berate me in the comments. Today, I wanted to start with one of my favorite breakfast dishes in the South, which is biscuits and gravy. This typically consists of a buttermilk biscuit and topped with a white pepper gravy, which may or may not have breakfast sausage in it. So you probably want to know how I did this, so let's just jump into that and see what the recipe is. Alright, for the biscuit, I went with the same recipe I used for my English muffin, which was a 1-to-1 of pork rinds and eggs, and a little baking powder. Here I have 3 ounces of ground pork rinds, 3 eggs, and a half teaspoon of baking powder. Grab a fork or rubber spatula and mix all of this together. You'll be done mixing once all the pork rinds are hydrated and kind of look like this. Growing up in a southern home, you'd 9 times out of 10 see anyone cooking using a cast iron pan. You'd also probably see a jar of bacon grease somewhere nearby that pan. So since I'm trying to hit all the nostalgic points for myself, I'll be using this cast iron pan. And unfortunately, I'm out of bacon grease, so I'll be using a little bit of beef tallow. Now, you can place a ring mold if you want to, but in the middle of doing this, I just wanted to try to see what a free-form biscuit may look like and how it would work out, and to be honest, I like that look a lot better. It seemed to look a lot more like a biscuit than compared to the ring mold one. You want to let these bad boys cook for 5 to 6 minutes in total, and you want to flip them occasionally to keep them from burning. In this recipe, you should be able to get about 3 biscuits in total. This next part is optional, but I enjoy it for the flavor and plating. Take a few leaves of fresh sage and just put it into your hot oil and begin to fry it. The leaves will crisp up and it'll flavor your fat. Personally, in my gravy, I like breakfast sausage. Be on the lookout for the stuff that says country sausage because, in my experience, this has the least amount of additives and garbage in it. Place this into a pan over medium heat and begin to break it up. We want pretty fine crumbles here, so take your time and keep chopping it. Once it's finished, set aside and grab another cast iron pan, maybe something a little smaller in an attempt to reduce our cream. Put 1 pint of heavy whipping cream over medium heat and bring to a simmer. Whisk the... Alright, let's, how about a half pint of heavy whipping cream instead? Next, we want to whisk in 2 ounces of cream cheese to stabilize our gravy. Crack in a half teaspoon of black pepper or until it tastes right. If you've never had this before, a half teaspoon is probably a safe place to start, but I personally probably added about a full teaspoon to get it to the flavor that I wanted it. Put in about half your sausage and continue to reduce your mixture until your desired consistency has been reached. Salt this to taste. I didn't add any salt until the very end because reducing things increases the salinity of them from the evaporation of water. Alright, since I had some extra time spent cleaning up, my biscuits deflated a bit, but they still look pretty good. Split them in half and spoon over your gravy, making sure that you get sausage on every one. Alright, well, this one really took me back to my childhood. I haven't had biscuits and gravy in a while, well, maybe even about 3 or 4 years I haven't had it, but this was really just an epic treat and super nostalgic for me. The textures were on point, the flavor was 100% nostalgic. To make the hollandaise sauce, you need to get 3 eggs and separate the egg yolks into a heat-safe bowl. Then you'll put a pan over medium-low heat and add 3 ounces of butter to it. Typically, hollandaise is made with ghee, which is butter that has had the milk solids separated from it. Keep an eye on the butter because we do not want it to brown. Pour the melted butter into a heat-proof container. Next, bring a pot of water to a simmer for our double boiler. Place your heat-safe bowl over this double boiler that contains your egg yolks. Whisk your egg yolks until they have thickened and lightened in color. Once this has happened, slowly pour in your melted butter. Continue to do so until all of the butter has been incorporated. You should end up with a sauce that is thick and leaves ribbons behind whenever you pour it on top of itself. Next, add a squeeze of lemon juice, or about a teaspoon, and season with salt to your taste. Set aside for later. Add 1 cup of processed pork rinds and 2 eggs to a mixing bowl. Mix this together using a fork or a spoon. A whisk like this isn't ideal here, as you can see, it just gets clumped up in the middle and makes for a hard time. Next, add a 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder and mix it in. Place a non-stick pan over medium-low heat. Add a little olive oil or butter to the pan to get that melting. Get a ring mold like this one and grease it up with your olive oil or butter. Now add 2 to 3 tablespoons of your pork rind mixture into the pan in your ring mold. Cook this for 5 or 6 minutes or until golden brown. Carefully flip it over as the top is still raw and could fall apart. Let the other side cook for another 5 to 6 minutes. Once it is done, it will have a sponge-like texture and will bounce back to the touch. Alright, for your poached eggs, get your same non-stick pan and clean it out. Place some water in it, put it over medium heat, and bring it to a simmer. Throw in a big pinch of salt to season the water. Now crack an egg into a small bowl or measuring cup and carefully pour it into your simmering water. Spoon the simmering water over the top of the egg yolk if it is exposed. Do this until it looks like the egg white has been cooked. Cook it for 3 to 5 minutes. Carefully scrape under the egg with a slotted spoon. It should release pretty easily, but it may be stuck. Flip this over and cook for another 1 to 2 minutes. Remove from the pan and let drain on a paper towel, and repeat this one more time. Alright, split your English muffin in half. Eggs Benedict usually calls for Canadian bacon or ham, but I went with a fancy version instead and used prosciutto. I may or may not have had a little trouble with my poached eggs, but you can always just snap them in like this and it'll be perfect. Now pour over a little hollandaise over each of these. I went a little extra fancy and added some smoked paprika for a little color and extra flavor. Well, it's only 9:30 a.m. and it's already 95 degrees, so why not make a sausage, egg, and cheese McMuffin? Huh? That doesn't sound hot at all. But seriously, I did ask y'all what y'all wanted to see from McDonald's for breakfast. And really, the majority was the McGriddle, but I'm going to need some time to think about that to figure out exactly how I want to make it. But for now, let's go ahead and make a sausage, egg, and cheese McMuffin. I'm very confident with that. I can get that done right now. So let's get it done. So the basis for this one is pretty easy. I've already made the muffin recipe before, so I've already got that going for me. And that's probably the easiest part of this whole thing besides the making of it, because otherwise it'll be a bunch of grease splattering all over my knees. But that's okay, it's worth it for this end product because I'm kind of excited about that. Spatula, fork. I'll use something else. That should be it. I have these pork rind crumbs. Usually I would do this myself, but I found that it's a lot easier to have something in the van good to go to make things like this. So I bought these. These are from Pork King Good. Never used them before. They're not a sponsor. I'm excited to see how they taste. Go ahead and make this muffin mix. Smell like pork rinds. Well, you look at that. It tastes like it too. All right. I'm going to be eyeballing this, but I'll have all the written measurements down below. That should be good. To this, we'll crack in 2 eggs. Oh, God. Then we'll add in a half a teaspoon of baking powder. Definitely not Drunks. Typically the pork rinds are going to be salty enough to not have to add any seasoning whatsoever. But if you find that your pork rinds are bland or you just want to add something to it, feel free to do that. These are pretty well seasoned. It tastes really good actually. Take your mixture, give that a little hot forking action. Just let that absorb. It'll take a little time. It'll sit there and it'll kind of thicken up. Let's go ahead and get all the other little things prepped up, like the sausage patty and the egg. For this recipe, I'll be using this Tennessee Pride breakfast sausage. Feel free to use whatever you want. This one is, it tastes really good. The only problem is it has all the malted dextrin and stuff like that. I will eventually be making a recipe on how to make some good breakfast sausage with all the garbage in it. But for now, I don't have the time for that today or the will to sit in the heat to make that happen. So for now, I'm just going to use this, and it's pretty damn good. I'm just going to get a couple of patties out of it. Well, it'd probably help if I turned the gas on. Oh, I don't even have it in there. This will produce a good bit of grease, and we'll use that to cook our muffin on. It was a bit too big, but it'll be okay. Well, since I don't have too many interesting things to say about sausage cooking, let's just get to the point. All right, these are done. All right, so I've seen a video of how McDonald's makes their eggs, and they have a big ring mold, and you crack an egg in, just a little bit of water, and then you steam it. But I don't have a lid for this thing, but I do have a ring mold, little crazy guy ring mold, and they usually cook it in clarified butter over super low heat. So I'm gonna turn my heat pretty low. I'm gonna use the grease to do this. So we'll just put this down, crack an egg. I'll help this along just a little bit by poking some little tiny holes in it. There we go. That'll work. Shouldn't take too long on the other side, probably like 20 seconds at the most. Because I still want it to be kind of malleable and not super hard fried. In fact, this is a lot harder than they even get it to. But I think they also use parchment paper under it to keep it from doing this. But either way, it's okay. It'll still be good. Egg patty. We'll do one more. Yep. Alright, second egg's done. By the way, I added a trash can in this van, and it's probably the nicest addition I've done so far. So, I've done this before with the muffins, where I've used a ring mold to make it look nicer. And I don't remember the outcome, but I think the freehand one, where I just mush it down in the pan, might have looked better, but let's just go ahead and do a couple of them to see how they look. One with the ring mold and one without. So this stuff is pretty sticky. That's why I'm wearing gloves right now. I'm just going to separate that into two pieces. Try to get it as even as possible. If you're willing to make this super legit, you would do this by weight. Just get the weight of the total dough you have and then just split it by two. And if I remember correctly, I think the one in the ring mold just didn't look as good. It was too perfect maybe, but I could be wrong. Because if you were doing a English muffin, this is how you would do it. You would be dough ball, kind of flattened already, and you would just put it down, and it would kind of get crinkly on the outside. Oh yeah. That's looking pretty good. It almost looks like the biscuits I made. Alright, whatever I said in the first one, I think I disagree with. I'm pretty sure I said I like this one better. This one's going to have a lot more rise to it just because it had a more chance to cook evenly on these edges. So it's going to be a lot taller by the time it's done cooking. This one will remain pretty flat just because it didn't have a chance to have heat come up to the side of it. All we're waiting for now is for the center of the dough to be cooked. And after that, we can put this thing together. We'll call it on that one. You know what? In fact, I think what I'm going to do is split it here. Let that griddle on one side. We have a nicely split muffin already. Yeah. Oh yeah, I think I like that. I kind of like that more. Cool, that works for me. I don't have to cut it either. And it's got pretty good rise on both sides. So it shouldn't take much longer after you flip it like that. Yeah, it's done. We can assemble this thing finally. All right, the assembly is pretty simple here. I'm gonna take our muffin, which is this is the one with the ring mold. Keep our top separate. I'm gonna take a slice of trash cheese, lay that garbage right on there, follow that up with your sausage patty, and then finally your egg patty. And you'll top it. I don't know about you, but I think that looks pretty damn legit. Let's go eat this thing. I don't feel like sitting in this van anymore. We'll go to a bench real quick, so just give me 1 second. All right, let's give this thing a try. Now, I'm sure you know that this was probably going to be pretty easy to make. It's just a few simple ingredients that work well together. Usually if I get breakfast at McDonald's, I usually get this, but without the muffin. So it's just kind of nice to have something kind of similar. But that's it. McDonald's sausage, egg, and cheese McMuffin. Hey there, my meaty friends. This is Reed, aka CarnivorousChef. I know for a fact that everyone needs a treat from time to time. If you're not one of those people, feel free to let me know in the comments. But for the rest of you, throw a like on this video if you feel the same way. Whenever I go off and eat something that's way outside of the diet, I end up regretting it for a few days at a time. But what if I didn't have to? What if I could feel like I'm eating something that looks and tastes kind of like a cinnamon roll? I think I will. If you passed by a Cinnabon in your local mall recently and just had some full body convulsions to stop there, maybe it's time to try these. You don't have to sneak in to make these, but you can if you want to. Grab a bowl and magically add in 5 ounces of ground pork rinds. I suggest using the plain flavor here. Next up, add in 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder and fork that in there real good like. After that, grab 5 eggs. When you grab them, smack them onto a flat surface. This will breach the membrane of the egg, allowing you to open it up completely. Drop in the contents of all eggs into your pork rinds along with 1 teaspoon of your choice of sweetener, if you're using any. You're going to want to fork this pretty hard swiftly to get it combined. Once you have, set it aside to allow everything to absorb. Now, we need to work on the buttery cinnamon center. Take 1 stick of butter and melt it into a bowl in any way you can. Add in a pinch of salt along with 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. Then, if you're using sweetener, add in 1 to 1.5 tablespoons worth. Block the view of you mixing it from your camera while you mix it up. I set mine aside while I pulled out a baking sheet lined with a silicone baking mat. Pour your pork rind mixture onto it and spread it out onto a nice rectangle. Like always, you can be as meticulous with this part as you want to be, but just make sure it's rectangular at the end. Place this into an oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 176 degrees Celsius for 5 to 7 minutes or until the batter has just set. While that's in the oven, let's whip up this icing. Get a bowl, add in 2 heaping tablespoons of collagen, then 3 tablespoons of a sweetener of choice. Follow this up with a 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla extract, a small pinch of salt, and then 3 tablespoons of heavy cream. Try not to be too much in shock while you're whisking this. I was shooting in the dark just a little bit here, but I had a feeling it would work out. I just didn't think it'd work out this well. I pulled out my pork rind plate about 10 minutes ago and let it cool off so I could handle it. I also placed my butter mixture in the fridge for some reason and it hardened a little bit, but that's fine. Yours should be still rather liquidy if you left it out. Spread the butter and cinnamon mixture on top of this by hand. Leave about 1 inch on one end for rolling it up. Once all of it has been applied, start rolling it up. It may feel like it's not going to cooperate at first, but just keep going. The bigger the roll, the more steady it gets. Once you get to the end, press on it firmly for about 1 minute to make sure it stays together. When you're cutting this, just do your best to get even cuts. The recipe should yield 6 of what I'm calling normal size cinnamon rolls. But you can get 8 small cinnamon rolls, 4 large rolls, or even 2 burritos. Plate these puppies up and let's pour over our collagen frosting. I just went ahead and used all the frosting I had because I didn't want to sit there and eat it out of the bowl. I'm extremely happy with how these turned out. Let's take this first bite for my Patreon community. Whether or not you're using sweeteners here, I think you'll enjoy these. The form factor and texture are just a unique experience whether they're real or carnivore. Don't miss out on this one. Hey there my meaty friends, this is Reed, aka CarnivorousChef. It's morning time around here. I start my days off with a ½ liter of water, just to get the pipes moving. I'm pretty low energy as it is, so I tend to make a full pot of coffee in my pour-over coffee pot. But you're here to learn how to make a carnivore breakfast pizza. For that, you're going to need some breakfast sausage. I prefer products that say country sausage because they typically have less ingredients in them. I cooked mine the night before to eat with a few eggs. I saved the rest in the fridge, so you can use leftovers if you want. For the crust, add in 1 ounce of pork rinds, 4 ounces of shredded low-moisture mozzarella cheese. Try to go for the block, but if you're feeling lazy, a little tree bark isn't going to kill you. Crack in 1 egg, and finally about 8 ounces of your cooked breakfast sausage. Blend this on low for about 2 minutes or until you get a dough with this kind of consistency. No breakfast is complete without bacon. Grab 4 slices of some thick cut bacon and cut it into strips or dice it like I'm doing here. Feel free to use leftover bacon here as well if you happen to have it. It's mostly going to be a topping. Place your diced bacon into a pan set over medium-high heat and cook until well brown and a little bit crispy. Set aside and reserve that bacon grease. I'm going to use the grease in my cast iron pan to let the dough fry. Place this sausagey pizza dough into your pan and spread evenly. Make sure you get to the edges. Once you've gotten those clean edges, place this onto a burner over medium heat for about 7 or 8 minutes. In the meantime, let's get our sauce done. Set up a bain-marie and add about 3 ounces of cream cheese, a 1/4 cup of half and half, a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, a 1/4 teaspoon of granulated garlic, a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and a pinch of dried thyme. All you want to do is give this the hottest whisking of your life until everything combines. This will be a thick boy sauce when it's done. Set aside in the bain-marie while we check on our pizza crust. This is looking fine, but we need to get a bit of the grease out. Do that by using a paper towel. Place this into an oven set to 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 to 12 minutes or until the top of the crust is set. Now for the final topping. Poaching eggs is really simple. Place the saute pan over medium-high heat and bring about 1 inch of water to a boil. You'll want about 3 tablespoons of vinegar added to the pan to help keep the egg whites from going insane. Crack 3 eggs into a bowl. This is to ensure that the yolks won't break in the water. Use a spoon and make a little water tornado. Would that be a water spout? You can place this in 1 egg at a time if you'd like, but I like to put them all in at the same time. Once they're in, I like to gently scrape the bottom just in case some of the egg whites stick. To speed up the process, use your spoon to base water onto the tops of the eggs. After 2 minutes, give these eggs a gentle flip and allow to cook for another 1 to 2 minutes. Remove from the water and let drain on a paper towel. Don't forget to season with a pinch of salt. Okay, our crust is out of the oven and we can finally assemble. Spread on an even layer of your sauce. You may have a bit more than needed, but that's okay. You can save it for later purposes. Sprinkle over 1/3 of your bacon bits. Follow it up with about 2 ounces of shredded mozzarella cheese, and finish up with the rest of your bacon. Place this back into the oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 13 to 16 minutes or until your cheese is golden brown. That is beautiful. Carefully scrape this to get it out of the pan. The final step is to lay down your poached eggs. Stab these with a sharp knife to let that yolk get all over the place. This pizza serves about 3 people or 1 average sized person for their daily calories. Now that's a nice slice. For whatever reason, I think this is the crispiest carnivore pizza I've ever made. I don't know if the bacon grease had anything to do with it, but I also am not going to question it and probably use it every single time I make a pizza. See y'all next time. Hey, how's it going? This is Reed, aka CarnivorousChef, and you're watching Down South Carnivore, the southern cooking show that nobody asked for and has the incorrect name in the intro. This week's video is chicken fried steak, which, as you can see in the intro, has a little lore from 1911. Its roots can be found in Texas and is absolutely delicious. How about we get started with our gravy? I still have yet to master a good gravy recipe on this diet, but I have some ideas that I'll bring up in another video soon, so look out for that. For now, let's get a pan set over medium-low heat and add a half cup of beef bone broth, 1 scoop of collagen, and a half cup of heavy cream. We want to basically reduce this until it is a thickened sauce, which took me about 14 minutes total, and even then it still wasn't quite where I wanted it, but it's good enough. Now that it's thickened, salt and pepper this to taste. Ooh, check out my shameless plug too. Now let's set this aside over the lowest heat you can to keep it warm while we take care of our steak. The steak choice is entirely up to you, but I do recommend something a little fattier and at least a choice cut of meat. Here I have a ½ pound of New York strip, which I want to trim up a bit and then cut on a sharp bias. I'm doing this because I want it to be as flat as possible beforehand. Take your fat trimmings and add them to a pan set over nearly low heat, but still between medium and low heat to begin to render the fat. I suggest throwing in a slice or 2 of bacon to render this fat as well. To pound the steak out, take a sheet of parchment paper or plastic wrap and place 1 piece of your steak on top, and then cover with plastic wrap and find something heavy to flatten it out with. I'm using my small cast iron pan here. You don't need to use a lot of force here, you just need to let the weight of the pan do the work for you. And also watch out for those poor little fingers. You don't want to smash those, do you? We're shooting for about a 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch thick piece of steak. Repeat with the other piece and bring them over to your dredging station. Crack in 2 eggs to a pie plate or wide bowl and mix together. Next, take 2 cups of pork rind panko and place onto a plate. Crack a little black pepper into this, and garlic powder is a nice addition to this as well, but I skipped it this time. Okay, for a dredge, you want to have a dry hand and a wet hand. I need you to pick which is which now. This is important, you do not want to screw this up. Now that you've done that, take a piece of your flattened steak and place it into your egg mixture and coat both sides. Next, take this and place it onto your pork crumbs. Grab a small handful and throw them on the top side to evenly coat and firmly press it in. Set aside and repeat with the rest, and now we can get started with frying. Are you ready to pan fry? Are you? Good! Grab a large cast iron pan and add in your rendered steak and bacon fat. This isn't quite enough to pan fry, so add in about 4 tablespoons of butter as well. Turn the heat to medium high and let this get melty. Once all of your butter is melted, carefully place your pieces of breaded steak into the pan. Cook for 2 to 4 minutes per side depending on how done you want the steak to be. I let mine sit for 2 minutes per side and it was medium rare and on its way to medium. If a lot of smoke starts to come up from the pan, turn the heat down because that means the butter is starting to burn. After a lot of time has finished, place the pieces onto a paper towel lined plate to allow to drain. Salt these immediately while they're still hot. Alright, so we want to serve up these crispy steaks with a full breakfast of fried eggs, bacon, coffee, and gravy. It's finally time to dig in. You know, this is such a simple procedure, and it takes the food that I find most monotonous from time to time and just turns it into something special. Like I said in the intro, the gravy isn't perfect, but it still tastes great with the fried steak dipped into it. I think the most natural place to start making a breakfast bake would be to make some bacon. While you're doing something natural, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel. Actually, I think eggs would be the hallmark to anything breakfasty. But we want to make the excellent choice of not cooking those too early. Anyways, place 1 pound of bacon onto some foil or parchment paper and into an oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 13 to 15 minutes. So when it comes to memory cards, files can corrupt. You know, corrupted like the long, elaborate shot I did to tell you to take a bowl and add in 4 ounces of ground pork rinds, 4 eggs, and 1 teaspoon of baking powder into a bowl and mix. Mine were spicy as fuck. We cooked the bacon already, right? Oh, yeah, we did. Once it's cooled, take your bacon pan and pour in all of that savory bacon grease into it. We're going to use it to fry up some eggs. You can use butter to fry up your eggs if you want to, but I think bacon grease is a much better option. To fry the basic egg, I suggest using some sort of nonstick pan or a very well-seasoned cast iron pan. Place it over medium heat with your grease and let that start to shimmer. Crack your egg into the pan, and I like to take my spatula and kind of poke holes into the thick egg whites. I don't know if this actually does anything, but I enjoy doing it. Take your spatula and scrape up that slippery little egg and give it a careful flip. I'm going for a really runny yolk in mine, so I'm only going to cook these for 2 to 3 minutes. Once they're all cooked up, let's grab another pan and plop in 1 pound of breakfast sausage. I have this pan over medium-high heat for the record. Start breaking it up with a spatula, and optionally add in 2 teaspoons of hot sauce. I only did this since I already have a spicy base, so don't feel obligated, but it is really tasty. I also went ahead and added a preemptive half teaspoon of black pepper. Once the sausage is broken up and cooked all the way through, remove half of it and set aside. Now, we want to make our sausage gravy by adding in a half pint of heavy cream and 2 ounces of cream cheese. Bring this to a boil and reduce the heat to medium. I went ahead and added an additional 2 teaspoons of hot sauce just because I'm feeling muy caliente. Stir this until thickened. I like to be able to see that creamy river part when my spatula goes through it. Taste it and hit it with a little more black pepper if you feel like it needs more. Okay, all the components are finally done. I greased down an 8x11 baking dish with unsalted butter. I probably should have went a touch heavier just because things did stick, but a little scraping of the spatula did help to get the food out. It's not like it was permanently stuck. Speaking of scraping, scrape out your pork rind mixture and spread evenly. Place this into an oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 minutes just to give it a little par bake. While that's in, let's tend to our bacon. I was worried that if I left the bacon in full strips, it'd be hard to cut through, so I cut mine into quarter sections. It worked out like I wanted it to. Alright, so once the crust has been par-baked, use some uncorrupted footage to prove that you've put on about 3/4 of your sausage gravy. I followed this up by layering on my fried eggs, then the bacon. Since this obviously wasn't going to be good enough as it is, I decided to shred over about 3 ounces of smoked cheddar. And finally, I finished up with my reserved breakfast sausage. Place this back into your still hot oven for 15 to 20 minutes, or until the cheese is slightly browned. Here's some chive slicing ASMR for you. Alright, the timer's up. Pull this opulent thing out, and feel free to go ahead and dig in if you want your face to melt off, but I highly suggest you let this cool for about 10 minutes. You should be able to get about 9 normal servings or 5 large servings from this thing. Now, I know this isn't the fanciest thing I've ever made, but I'm probably more excited about this than I should be. Alright guys, I'm not gonna lie to you. I was really craving a breakfast burrito from Taco Bell, so I thought instead of just, saying screw this diet, I'm gonna just kind of make something that's similar. So if you've ever had a breakfast burrito from Taco Bell, you'll know that the eggs inside of it they're probably fake, but they're very soft and they have like a cheese sauce in them, and it just makes it a really good experience to eat with, a chewy tortilla. That's why I decided to scramble my eggs in a double boiler. I didn't add butter to this, but looking back at it, you should probably add a couple tablespoons of butter to this as well, just to keep it from sticking to the pan so bad. So whenever I'm scrambling my eggs in any way I do it, I usually just add black pepper to it. I don't like to add salt at the beginning because it seems to make the eggs a little more firm for some reason, and I'm not looking for anything firm about these eggs. I want these to be almost juicy with cheese. So we have this double boiler set up here because it's going to help us get a smaller curd, and it's going to keep it from overcooking, and it's not going to cook it nearly as fast as it would in a normal pan. And that's really the only reason why we're doing this. You can do this in a normal pan if you want to, but if you want to follow what I'm doing, just use a double boiler. I wanted to add some American cheese and some bacon. I tore up the American cheese just to give it a chance to kind of emulsify a little bit easier in there. If you put just whole slices in there, it tends to take a lot longer than it does if you break it up. There's also pre-cooked bacon. Feel free to fry your own bacon if you want like crispier bacon. But if you've ever had the Taco Bell bacon breakfast burrito, you'll know that it's pre-cooked crumbles. And yeah, just kind of set it aside. It should stay warm while we get our tortilla ready. And for the tortilla, I suggest getting a sheet pan lined with a silpat, but you can always use parchment paper on here if you want to. I have 3 ounces of Parmesan cheese that I've grated myself, and I just kind of, spread it out into a circle. That's why I say use the silpat. Some of them have this nice guide to make, just the perfect circle on there. I threw mine in the oven at 350 degrees for about 5 minutes, and then once it was out, I put my eggs on there and folded it as best as I could like a burrito. Only went in for 5 minutes because if you leave it in there much longer, it starts to get hardened really quick and you'll end up with just a cracker. You won't be able to fold it like this at all, so just keep an eye on it as well because some ovens are hotter than others, and I'm also using a high convection oven. So once you get it rolled up, you can keep it as it is. I decided to place mine back in the oven for a few more minutes. I thought it'd brown up a little bit more, but I think it'd take a lot more longer than what I think, just because, it has a lot of liquid in the inside of it. But either way, if it's done, it's done. I threw mine in some foil wrap just to kind of give me an authentic breakfast burrito kind of feel. I just went somewhere and got it. All right, let's give this thing a taste. And yeah, it's pretty much exactly what I wanted. It's a lot of cheese, I will say. Hey there, my meaty friends. So what is that? Little Grobble's gourmet corned beef? What are you going to do with that? Well, today we're going to be making some corned beef and Swiss egg bites. Simply remove the corned beef from your packaging and make sure to keep this little packet of like seeds and stuff and whatever. And if you're curious to know what's in this little packet, it's stuff like coriander, cloves, black pepper, coriander, some more cloves, probably a little oregano. It's mostly coriander. That's okay because that's the flavor. To your Instant Pot, go ahead and add about 2 cups of water and then get that thing slid on, make sure it's locked, and set to pressure cook for 43 minutes. Release the steam and open her up. Feels like I'm looking into an abyss. But what comes out of it is anything but abysmal. Take your corned beef, give it a nice rough chop. And this is definitely way too much corned beef for just me, so I'm going to share it with someone. Yeah, just get a piece. Get it right there. Yeah, I know it's hot. It's very hot. There you go. Anyways, we're going to use about half of this corned beef. Go ahead and keep chopping this until it's a finer texture. So you can go ahead and put the rest of this up because you will definitely be snacking on that in a bit. Now, I'm going to get some Swiss cheese. You can tell it's Swiss because there's no holes in the Swiss cheese for some reason. I don't know why. But you're going to want to grate about 3 ounces of it. Next up, crack 3 eggs into a bowl. Add in about half of your cheese, a big pinch of salt, a little over a 1/4 cup of sour cream, and then finally all of your corned beef. Now, grab a whisk and set your arm to hyperdrive. Once that's all mixed up, you can let your arm cool down and reset because that was a lot. Now, let's grab a non-stick muffin tin, or what I think is a non-stick muffin tin, and put all of our batter in it. You should have enough for about 6 egg bites. And before we cook these, you're going to take the rest of your not-so-holy Swiss cheese and place it on top of each egg bite. Now, place this into an oven at 350 degrees for about 15 to 16 minutes, or until they have risen slightly. Once they're out, let them cool for about 5 minutes and then begin the arduous process of taking them out. Remember how I said this pan was non-stick? Yeah, that was a lie. Just assume that all pans are not actually non-stick. You should have greased this down with just a little bit of butter to be able to get these out with ease. Luckily, with a little finesse, I was able to get all of these out without too much damage. Since the cheese on top kind of crisped up a little bit, I had to give it some force to cut it in half to give you a cross section.
Hey y'all, this is Reed, aka CarnivorousChef. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make stuffed carnivore crepes. One day in the early fall, I decided to make myself some tacos and just winged the tortilla recipe. What came out was light, thin, and a little pliable. Ever since then, I've wondered what to do with them, and I came across a cookbook with stuffed crepes, and it culminated in the perfect idea. There's a sweet and savory crepe recipe in this video, so be sure to check out the whole thing to see what I did. For the crepe batter, we need to get it pretty thin, just like a real crepe batter. This is 3 ounces of ground pork rinds, 6 eggs, 3 tablespoons of water, and 3 tablespoons of heavy cream. Give this a solid whisking. It should look rather runny. And then let it rest for about 15 minutes. We need the pork rinds to hydrate so we can readjust our liquids if we need to. Mine stiffened up pretty well, so I added another 3 tablespoons of cream and 3 tablespoons of water. Give it a second good whisking and it should be good to go. Set aside for later. When I think crepes, I think whipped cream. So how about a chipotle maple whipped cream? You can keep your whipped cream stable by using gelatin. Just mix 1 teaspoon of dry gelatin and 3 teaspoons of really hot water and mix until dissolved. This is really only if you want to have whipped cream a couple days from now because it will deflate with time. Now, you can whip your cream any way you want, but today I'll be using an immersion blender. For this recipe, you're going to need 1 cup of heavy cream, there we go, a 1/4 cup of erythritol, and feel free to use whatever sweetener you like best, a 1/4 teaspoon of chipotle powder, and 1 teaspoon of maple extract. Using an immersion blender, blend on high until soft peaks start to form. This took me about 2 minutes. Once this happens, pour in 2 teaspoons of your prepared gelatin, if you want a stable whipped cream that is, and blend on high again until stiff peaks have formed. It should look a little something like this. Now, place a gallon Ziploc bag into a pint glass and pour your whipped cream into this. This will be used later for piping. Store in the fridge until you're ready for it. We can't have stuffed crepes without a filling too, so let's get some cheesecake vibes going on. For the sweet filling, you're going to need 4 ounces of room temp cream cheese, a 1/4 teaspoon of chipotle powder, 1 teaspoon of maple extract, and 2 tablespoons of erythritol. Use a rubber spatula to mix and mash this together into a paste. Take as much time as needed to make sure everything is incorporated. Once it's well combined, set it aside at room temp. For our crepes, we need to be using low heat and something non-stick. Place 1 tablespoon of butter into your pan and begin coating the whole thing. The butter is here for insurance that nothing will stick, along with a little added flavor. Alright, let's pretend that this isn't the 4th crepe I've made and pour in 2/3 of a cup of your batter and begin to smooth it out. You basically want to cover the entirety of the flat part of your pan. Cook this for about 1 to 2 minutes or until your top side is starting to dry out. If you're feeling bold and willing to make a couple of mistakes, flip that bad boy like a real chef. Place this on a paper towel lined plate, ensuring to separate the others with paper towels as well. If you want to be a smart chef and have your crepes look perfect, slide it cooked side down onto a plate and then flip the crepe over into the pan. Alright, let's plate this up. Take a crepe and turn it rough side up. Grab about half of your cream cheese mixture and begin to spread out to the edges. If you left this cream cheese out long enough, it should be rather easy to spread. Mine was a little bit difficult because it was cheap brand, I believe, but it's hard to tell. Maybe buy a higher quality brand or even some whipped cream cheese to make this easier for you. fold this in half once, and then twice, and now you have a stuffed crepe. Grab your bag of maple chipotle whipped cream and cut the corner of it off. Start placing dabs of it all over and stop once you realize that you're not an artist. Sprinkle with a little extra chipotle powder for color. Now, we can't have dessert breakfast without savory breakfast, right? Let's make a chive whipped cream by adding 1 cup of heavy cream, an 1/8 teaspoon of garlic powder, and a few twists of freshly cracked black pepper. Blend this on high with an immersion blender until stiff peaks have formed. Now, fold in, not blend in, 2 tablespoons of finely chopped chives. Place into a Ziploc bag and set in the fridge until we're ready for it. I think bacon and eggs are going to complement this chive whipped cream nicely. So let's dice up a strip of bacon and start to cook it just before it gets crispy. Reduce your heat to low and discard most of your bacon grease. Replace that with 1 tablespoon of butter and slowly stir in 3 eggs and then season with salt and pepper. Cook this slowly until your eggs are at 80% cooked and then remove from the heat. The cliche of if it looks cooked in the pan, then it'll be overcooked on the plate is 100% true, especially for eggs. Alright, same procedure as before. Spread out your eggs to the edge on your crepe and then fold twice. Now you should definitely add some sort of cheese here. For whatever reason, it just happened to slip my mind and I missed it. It's a required optional ingredient. Now, cut the corner of your chive whipped cream bag and pipe it on. Maybe even throw in a few more chives. Alright, savory first. Well, I mean, it's good. It really is. The whipped cream is missing something, though. Oh, salt. Just salt the top of it for a much better flavor experience. Alright, now let's taste the dessert one. It looks very promising. I actually had to take a moment for this one because it's so good. It took me a minute to remember that this was a carnivore dish. Honestly, I think this will be a new quote-unquote cheat meal for me for a long time to come.
You know, I think it's about time we learned how to make breakfast sausage finally. No more worrying about what's in it. And before we get started, just give me 1 second. That's what I think about your dextrose. Alright, for this sausage you're going to need some crushed red pepper, dried thyme, dried rosemary, dried sage, salt, pepper, and some ground pork. Alright, let's get started by getting our spices into the bowl. We'll start out with about 2 teaspoons of sage, 1.5 teaspoons of dried thyme, about 1/2 teaspoon of dried rosemary, about 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper, 2 teaspoons of salt, and about 1/2 teaspoon of crushed red pepper. Let's give that a little mix. Now we can take our fork, slap that into the bowl, and then we could just give it a nice slap. Alright, this is our finished breakfast sausage. It should smell just like breakfast sausage. If you know what that smells like, it smells pretty damn good. Let's see what we can do with this. Alright, they do look like little burger patties, but they sure don't smell like it. I gotta say, that's breakfast sausage. Now, since you know how to make this, let's make an actual breakfast with it. So, alright, let's start off by taking about 4 ounces of our newly made breakfast sausage, throwing it into a cold pan, and turning it on medium heat. As soon as you hear it start sizzling, let's take our spatula and start breaking this off. I've made this before in my biscuits and gravy video. What I'm making here is the sausage gravy, and I'm going to be putting on top of eggs. Once it's nicely brown, let's add an extra 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper to this. about a cup of heavy cream, followed by 1 ounce of cream cheese. Basically what you want to do here is take this and reduce it until it's thickened. And the cream cheese will help this get there a lot quicker than just the cream by itself. So if you want to omit the cream cheese, feel free to. It's not the biggest part of the recipe. Alright, once it's thickened, you can go ahead and turn the heat off. Mine's pretty thickened. It's a very gravy-like texture. Feel free to taste this for seasoning. I just tasted mine. I think it's good on salt, pretty good on pepper. Add a little bit of extra black pepper at the end. Let's just get this out so we can make the eggs real quick. Alrighty, let's get this thing made. So obviously just start with your sausage patty. Top it with your scrambled eggs. Spoon over some of your gravy. And then finish with some black pepper. Get your muffin tins out because it's time for beef muffins, or beefins for short. Start by seasoning the bottom of a couple of your muffin holes. I'm using steak dust from my company, Carnivore Companion. Link below. Feel free to season all of your holes if you're making enough beefins for the family. This recipe makes 2 muffins for that single, still-looking type who is tired of looking at your cat posters hanging above your TV while watching ER until you pass out. That's not me, I'm just a hungry little boy. Fill your muffin holes with about 3 ounces of ground beef and begin to spread it out. If you think this look grotesque, grow up. The goal for these is to make a beefy receptacle for other ingredients, but like handheld. Now that these have been formed, season them as you would any other hamburger patty. Put the muffin tin onto a sheet tray and then place it into an oven that's been preheated to 300 degrees Fahrenheit and allow it to cook for about 20 minutes. While that's cooking, let's make a couple different fillings. I wanted some jalapeno popper vibes in one of them, so I rough chop about a 1/4 cup of sliced jalapenos. This is obviously an optional ingredient, but you can comment about your distaste for them below if you feel compelled to do so. Get these into a bowl and let's figure out this cream cheese situation. If you get cream cheese that's packaged like this, you'll see that there are guidelines telling you how much cream cheese is in each block. For this recipe, I'll be using the 2-ounce mark. This works better with room temp cream cheese, but don't be scared to put some elbow grease to get this combined. Set that aside and let's make another potential filling. Again, if you're offended by any of these ingredients, just remember that they are optional. Here I have a few white mushrooms I'm going to simply slice, and then dice. Beautiful. Now let's grab a little bacon and give that a dice as well. Feel free to use pre-cooked bacon if you want. I just enjoy cooking mushrooms in the bacon fat. Add the bacon to a cold pan and then set the temperature to medium-high. Add in the mushrooms as well with a pinch of salt so that we can start to draw out their moisture. Mushrooms are quite moist and we don't want a sopping wet filling, so please don't skip this step. Cook this stirring occasionally until your bacon is at your desired doneness. If you desire raw bacon, please turn off this video and get some psychiatric help. Once the bacon and mushroom mixture is cooked, set it aside because I hear my beefin screaming from the oven. Speaking of sopping wet, let's drain some of this grease and beef water from this pan. And I don't know why, but I was just surprised at how well they formed. I could have guessed that they would turn out nicely based on the pan I was using, but it was still surprising. Okay, bro. Now that we're done here, let's start filling those beefin holes with our fillings. There should be about enough of these 2 fillings to make 2 beefins each. So, the fillings can make 4, 2 plus 2, yeah. And tasting these is quite nice. I've done plenty of stuffed meatballs and burgers in my life at this point, but having beefins is the experience I desire. It's almost like biting into a cupcake and getting the perfect amount of frosting in the bite. But in this case, it's more akin to a cheeseburger, because that's essentially what these are. Bacon. It's the first ingredient in our beefy Tex-Mex breakfast skillet. I have 4 strips of some fairly thick-cut hickory smoked bacon, and I need to get it into a smaller size. This usually means dice, but you can also take little nibbles with your teeth and spit those out into tiny pieces. But a knife will work better. And that's about it for the bulk of this prep. Throw that bacon into a heavy bottom pan that's set to medium-high heat and begin to render the fat. Once the bacon is slightly crispy, remove it from the pan and let it drain onto a paper towel. With all that bacon fat still in the pan, crumble up about 1 pound of ground beef, preferably 80-20. I reserve the bacon fat in hopes of imparting some of that bacon savoriness to the beef as well. You can go ahead and start breaking the beef up with a spatula, or again, you could take little nibbles with your tiny teeth to make the meat smaller, but I think the spatula is a better tool. Once the beef is nicely browned, do whatever you need to do to remove the excess grease from your pan. I suppose you could use your tiny mouth that houses your tiny teeth to slurp it up, but I think some sort of strainer would be the best option. Once the beef is strained, you can add it back to your pan with the heat set to medium. And we finally have the chance to add some seasoning. I'm using my taco seasoning, but I will leave a super simple taco seasoning recipe on screen now. You'll want to mix in about 1.5 teaspoons worth of the seasoning. Mix it around and let it cook for about a minute to get these spices a little toasty. Give it a taste for seasoning, and mine needed just a little touch more. Next up, add the first optional ingredient, which is about a tablespoon of some sliced green onions. I know I didn't show me slicing these bad boys, but I have to keep some sort of element of surprise for you. Once those are incorporated, reduce the heat to medium-low, and then add in 1.5 cups of beef stock. I was thinking about a shakshuka when I came up with this, hence the eggs. Oh wait, I haven't added the eggs yet. Make a few little wells for your eggs to live in and crack those little guys right into their new homes. You can use your little forehead to crack these eggs, but the counter works just fine too. Once those eggs are nestled into their new homes, let the beef stock come back to a simmer and cover with a lid. It will take between 4 and 6 minutes for the eggs to steam. Perfectly cooked egg whites and nice runny yolks. Let's get this thing off the heat and finished up. Top it with your bacon, followed by some shredded cheddar that you preferably shredded yourself with those little fingernails or cheese grater. Continue on with a little optional sliced avocado, a few more fresh green onions, and a light sprinkling of your taco seasoning. And finally, the yolk reveal. Amazing. Okay, let's give this a taste. It's like a cross between a taco soup, a shakshuka, and a cheesy breakfast skillet, and it's just delightful. I hope you and your tiny little teeth enjoy this one. If we're going to be copying a restaurant recipe, we're going to need to pretend like we're working in that restaurant. That means getting some gloves on and a scale out. It doesn't have to mean that actually, just please wash your hands. Once those hands are clean, weigh out some 80-20 ground beef into 3-ounce balls. When doing research for In-N-Out's burger weight, I got too many answers to decide on which one is correct, so I just stuck with 3-ounce balls. Once those are weighed, cup one of your balls between your hands and begin to massage them until you're finished. And this is what the finished ball should look like. Not perfect, but unique. Once you've got your balls massaged, burst out that $20 griddle you bought a decade ago and crank it all the way up. If you have a Blackstone, even better. But you'll need some simple tools like a big old dang spatula and something to help press the burgers down, as well as some salt and pepper. This is a 90-10 salt to pepper ratio blend. And the last thing we'll need is some parchment paper squares to prevent my cheap spatula from sticking to the burgers. Slap one of your balls on the griddle, season with a little salt and pepper, flatten it with your spatula, and let it do its thing. It's time to flip when you can see the crust starting to form. Give it a flip, add some cheese, and continue on. It looks like In-N-Out takes 2 already cheesed patties and flips them onto each other. I figured that they would cook the patties and then throw a slice of trash cheese in the middle of them, but hey, this works for me too. By the way, the griddle is a bit underpowered, but it'll make a damn good Flying Dutchman based on this bite. Yeah, this thing is cheesy as hell, and I'm not mad about it, but I am mad that I don't live next to an In-N-Out.
Time to deliver a pizza ball!
Place 11 ounces of ground beef into a food processor, follow it up with 5 ounces of pepperoni, and finally, some of the optional ingredient, black olives. I probably added about 3 ounces by weight. Since the pepperoni is already pretty salty, I'm only going to add a small pinch of salt, maybe a 1/4 teaspoon, as well as some garlic powder to keep in the theme with, pizza. Maybe another 1/4 teaspoon worth. Process this on low for about 2 to 3 minutes. This might seem like a long time, but I'm trying to emulsify the water from the beef and olives with the fat from the beef and the pepperoni. It will give it a sausage texture. And here's a pro tip for figuring out your seasoning with raw meat. Cook a little bit of it and eat it. That's it. My salinity was on point and this is already delicious. Feel free to stuff these pizza meatballs with whatever you want, but I'm going to use some low moisture mozzarella. If you use fresh mozzarella, just know that your end product will be a bit wet, but likely still delicious. I wasn't sure how many pizza balls this would actually make, so I just cut a bunch. I was able to get 7, but you should be able to make about 8 if you perfectly measure out 2-ounce balls. Grab a small bowl of water to wet your hands to make handling your meat a bit easier. Simply get a wad of your meat, roll it out, flatten it, add some cheese, and then close it up. Feel free to roll it around a little to get even more perfect balls. Repeat this process until they're all done. Place them into an oven at 325 degrees Fahrenheit for 19 to 22 minutes, or until they are lightly brown, or if you've got some cheese bustage. The bustage is fine. That just means you get to taste the cheese twice. Make sense? Good. I want to get a cross section to see the fruits of our labor, and yeah, melty and super juicy. And the flavor is fantastic. If you're into dipping things in the marinara, these would be a great option to dip in. But honestly, you're not missing anything if you eat them by themselves. And look at that, you've got a nice moisturizer that will drive all the ladies crazy. To be honest, I started this recipe in the hopes of something spectacular. But what happened was something actually just nice and simple. Let's tell the story of what happened with a recipe. Either place 2 ounces of pork rinds into a food processor and grind them down into crumbs, or use some already ground pork rinds. In the end, you're just going to need about 6 tablespoons of pork rinds, but I like to have some extra on hand, hence the 2 ounces. Next up, add 2 pounds of ground beef into a bowl. Use whatever lean to fat ratio you want here, preferably 80-20 though. Season this up with 1 tablespoon of steak seasoning of your choice, and then add your pork rinds. Finish this off with 1 large egg, and some optional parsley flakes. I just like the look of them in my meatloaf. Now it's time to become a human stand mixer. Combine these ingredients until homogeneous, or about 2 minutes. Now that your human stand mixer duties are done, dump this mixture into a small loaf pan. If you don't have a loaf pan, just use the smallest baking dish you have and smooth it out. I wrap this in foil, but looking back, I don't really think this is necessary. Either way, place this into your oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 to 35 minutes, or until it's nicely browned. Up next, I will show you this glaze I made, but you should just avoid it, unless you just really want to follow in my mistaken footsteps, which is fine too. I added a few tablespoons of warm beef stock to 1 egg yolk and gave it a mix. My thought behind doing this was how you would shine up a loaf of bread. Either pre or mid baking, you could brush egg onto a bread loaf and it'll make the bread look like 10 times better. I'll show you what happened, but first let's drain off some of this beef juice. I couldn't find my pastry brush, so I just kind of dumped this quote-unquote glaze on top and spread it around with a rubber spatula. I placed it back into the oven for an additional 5 minutes and was left with this. Pretty much the exact same meatloaf. But now with scrambled eggs at the bottom of the pan. That's fine. It was definitely worth a shot. Let's get this sliced up and onto a plate. It looks pretty good already, but I'm a little disappointed by the glaze. Let's just move on and give it a taste. It has a very nice and tight structure, just how I want it. It tastes fantastic and it's surprisingly juicy. Hey, come look at this. Just a little closer. Alright, you see this? That's right. Pickles. I tricked you. You thought it was just going to be more beef, didn't you? For this one, we're going to need some mini pickle spears, but you can also use pickle chips to make this as well. Once you've made your brine cucumber choice, lay some plastic wrap down onto your work surface, and then add 8 ounces of ground beef. Lay another sheet of plastic over it, and begin to press it out thin. If you don't want to use your hands, feel free to go snooping around your grandparents' bedroom and find one of those funny looking toys in the middle drawer, or anything cylindrical. Press the meat out to about 1/4 inch thick and remove the top plastic. Feel free to season this beef up with anything, but I went with jalapeno ranch for some extra zest. No, not the soap. Next up, top this with some cheese, or not, I don't control your life. If you do add cheese, I suggest something with a stronger flavor like the smoked Gouda, otherwise it'll just kind of be there for no reason. Now that your beef is cheesed up, lay some of your pickles down, giving them some room in between because they all need a breather for what's about to happen to them. Cut the beef around each pickle evenly and pick it up to make a nice little tangy beefy package. Once all of these are done, place them onto either a foil-lined sheet pan or cast iron if you want some aesthetic points. Top them with a little more of your seasoning and then place them into the oven that's preheated at 325 degrees Fahrenheit for 11 to 13 minutes or until they are nicely browned. The pickles will likely come out for a little screen time while they're cooking, but that's okay. Get these onto a plate and let them cool off a little. This is the perfect time to make a quick sauce to dip these in. Simply add 1/4 cup of sour cream, a couple teaspoons of your pickle brine, and a 1/2 teaspoon of seasoning of your choice, preferably whatever you use to season the beef with. Give this a speed/duration 2000% mix and taste. Mine's perfect, and I hope yours is too. Let's get some of this tasty sauce onto our plate and we can finally give these a taste. If my plate's looking a little up in this frame, it's definitely because I forgot to hit record and not because I dropped the plate. But yeah, these are tangy and rich and the sauce just adds some smoothness to the whole experience. I wouldn't be mad to see these on a sampler platter. At last, welcome viewer. I have here chicken and bacon. You choose the bacon and the story ends. You choose the chicken and you stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. But today, I suggest you choose both. That's right, chicken and bacon in a cohesive dish, including some ranch seasoning whose ingredients I'll leave on screen right now. Are you ready? Then let's get started. Place a pan over medium-high heat with 1 pound of bacon, and then add in about 1/2 cup of water. Cooking the bacon in water will allow for maximum extraction of that precious bacon grease. Continue to stir and cook your bacon until that magical grease starts to foam up. This foam lets us know that the bacon will be crisp and chewy. It should look a bit like this. Remove the bacon and reserve all of this grease because up next we'll be adding our diced chicken breast. You should have approximately 2 pounds of chicken breast for this recipe. Cook this in batches over medium-high heat, ensuring to lightly season each batch. Remove this from the pan and then discard the bacon grease, or save it, whatever you want to do with it. Or you can save it, I don't care. What you're left with is a nice buildup of fond. Place this pan back over medium heat and add in 1 cup of cold heavy cream and your ranch mix. The cold cream will help to release the fond from the pan and add even more flavor to our dish. Just use a wooden spoon or rubber spatula to scrape the sides and the bottom of the pan. Once every bit of that delicious fond has been released, let your cream simmer and thicken. You'll know it's done if it coats the back of a spoon like this. Give it a taste and adjust your seasonings as necessary to your palate. Find a receptacle to build this casserole in. Now you can add your cooked chicken and bacon. Top that with about a half cup of shredded cheddar and mix to distribute evenly. Next up, add all of that ranch sauce and again, mix to incorporate. You can simply add the sauce when you add the cheese if you like. I'm unsure why I made it so difficult for myself here. For a bit of added crunch, I decided to crush up a few pork rinds to the top of my casserole. If you don't like the flavor of these, feel free to skip them. They add texture, but they do also add that flavor. Finish this hot dish up with a little more cheddar on top, and cook this in an oven that's set to 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about 15 minutes or until the top of your casserole has slightly browned. Let it cool off for a few minutes before serving. You can add a myriad of other things to the top of this if you're feeling spicy, but this dish stands on its own. It's super savory, the bacon adds a nice chew, the sauce is creamy and rich, and that little bit of pork rind added a nice crunch. Now excuse me while I go feed this to my wife, who almost lives exclusively off of soup and buckwheat. So you're in a rush and you want a pizza fast? Here's what I've got for you. Grab a bowl, some ground chicken, and add half a pound of that chicken to that bowl. Just make sure it's exactly 8 ounces. Then crack in 1 egg. Shred in about 1.5 ounces of low moisture mozzarella. If you happen to have some pre-shredded cheese, that's fine too. I won't judge your cellulose consumption. We all get lazy from time to time. Add in a half teaspoon of salt, and finally about a 1/4 teaspoon of granulated garlic, or grand gar for short. Now, take your time-tested mixing spoon and mix everything until it's a nice and cohesive chicken mixture. I developed this recipe to be able to make a personal pan pizza, and this is about a 10-inch nonstick cake tin. I've had bad experiences with pans like this, so I cautiously buttered mine down. If you've only had positive experiences with these, you can skip the butter. Once it's buttered up, add your chicken mixture to the pan and start to spread it out. We're simply looking for it to be even. This will shrink up in the oven due to the water content, so just make sure you get it all the way out to the edge. Once it's evenly spread, place it into your oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for about 8 to 10 minutes or until it's looking a bit like this. Now, you can pick whatever toppings you want, but I'm going to go with what I have in the fridge. Instead of sauce, I'm opting for some cream cheese. It will melt up into a sauce-like consistency. And since I still have plenty of mozzarella, I'm going to use that. And for my final topping, I'm going to throw down some pepperoni. I shredded a little extra mozz over the top so I could get some brownage. Place this into your oven again, but under the broiler this time to let it darken. Keep an eye on it because the broiler has been known to ruin a lot of food. Mine cooked for about 5 minutes like this, and it's just beautiful. Let's get this out onto a plate. Nice. Pull out that pizza cutter that's been blocking up your drawer from opening and slice her up. Now, this is not meant to be a crispy crust replacement because it's just not. But it is a very high protein meal that tastes like pizza. It's scratching a niche that also helps you reach your protein goals. Enjoy. Okay, I need to get out of this kitchen and cook somewhere else. I need to be able to spread my wings and pressure cook chicken in a more stretchable area. I have the perfect place my pressure cooker and I can go. That's right, the dining room table that's 4 feet away. We're making a Cajun chicken grilled cheese, or melt for those that refuse to call it a grilled cheese. Get a pressure cooker and throw in 2 pounds of boneless and skinless chicken thighs, a single dried bay leaf, about 2 teaspoons of some super secret Cajun seasoning, and finally 1 cup of water or chicken stock. Get your pressure cooker closed and all the latches locked. If your cooker has a poultry button, then you're in luck because this is the popcorn button of the pressure cooker. If you don't have a poultry button, use the pressure cook button and set it to high for 10 minutes. Press start and just let it do its thing. Once the timer is off, release the pressure and let it sit for about 15 minutes before opening the lid. The best way to check if your chicken is shreddable is to take out a piece and press on it. It should give way under very little force. There are a lot of ways to shred it, so pick your weapon on that front. I'm just going to use a couple of forks. Get it all broken up, and after a few minutes, your chicken should look suspiciously like mine. Wait a minute, did you steal my chicken? Okay, chicken's done, and now it's time to make some classic pork rind grilled cheese bread. To a bowl, add in 1 ounce of ground pork rinds, 2 eggs, and finally about a half teaspoon of baking powder, which is the fluff maker. Give this a mix and let it sit for about 5 minutes to let that egg absorb. This mixture will be enough for exactly 1 grilled cheese. Next, get a baking sheet lined with either a non-stick baking mat or a piece of parchment paper. Spread this out into an even rectangle, and it should look a little bit like this. Throw it into an oven at 375 degrees Fahrenheit for 5 to 7 minutes or until it's nice and firm. Let it cool off, and now we can slice it right down the middle. I wanted mine to look perfect, so I cut off the metaphorical crust to make straight edges. You don't have to do this, but don't be ashamed if you do. I'm just trying to make it a little bigger than the size of my trash cheese. And believe it or not, we're actually going to toast this fake bread. Place a pan over medium heat and add in a couple knobs of butter. Once that's melted, you can lay down your pork rind bread with cheese on top. Add some of your chicken to one of the halves. Then flip the unchickened side onto the chicken side once it's browned on the bottom. And it's done. Cut it in half and give it a taste. Honestly, this is a great meal prep option. If you make 4 times the recipe for the pork rind bread, you can refrigerate these and have your chicken and cheese ready to go. Simply toast and eat. So you'll need a food processor for this one if you don't want to use pre-ground chicken. If you don't have one or don't feel like getting one dirty, pre-ground is totally fine. I'm going to use chicken thighs for my meatballs to ensure that we get a moist ball. Simply add in 1 pound of your thighs and then season it up however you want. If you want to follow along with me, I went with a half teaspoon of salt, a 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder, a 1/4 teaspoon of onion powder, and finally a 1/4 teaspoon of smokestack. If you don't have smokestack in your pantry, then shame on you. It should definitely be a part of your life. Link below. A 1/4 teaspoon of smoked paprika will work here too. Give this a few tantalizing pulses before blitzing this meat on high for a couple of minutes. It should be finely ground and a bit sticky to the touch. Let's get to the forming of these meatballs, which will be really simple. If you have a cookie scoop laying in that second drawer on the left, get it out and then clean it because I know it hasn't been used in a while. Simply make even scoops and place them onto a plate. You should end up with about 13 meatballs which need to be smoothed out. Simply wet your hands with some water and roll each one between them. They'll be perfect little packages of chicken meat that are just waiting to be seared. And to sear them, place a saute pan over medium-high heat and allow it to preheat. I added about 1 tablespoon of olive oil to my pan to cook my balls in, but you can use any other fat you want. Tallow would be nice here too. Add your chicken meatballs to your pan and begin to sear for about 1 to 2 minutes. After that time, just continue to flip each one until you have a nice sear on all sides. It should look a bit like this. Now that we have some nice color, add in 1 cup of heavy cream. To this, add a 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder, a half teaspoon of ground white pepper, a half teaspoon of salt, and mix all this in. Reduce the heat to medium-low, and this will start the process of reducing the cream for the sauce as well as cooking the middle of the chicken. Oops, almost forgot to add my half teaspoon of lemon juice. This will boost the flavor of the white pepper, which is already quite citrusy. Cover with a lid and allow to cook and reduce for about 3 minutes, just checking it every minute or so to make sure the heat isn't too high. Don't be afraid to reduce the heat if everything is going too fast. That's just you cooking. If you want to know when it's done, either cut one in half to verify or use a thermometer to make sure the internal temperature is 165 degrees Fahrenheit. Mine are done. Are yours done? The only thing that's left to do is to plate it up. I'm trying to impress all of you, so I'm going to add some chopped parsley to the top of mine. It's ironic because I will upset some of you by doing this. For those of you who aren't upset, I hope you enjoy this pretty picture of my balls. Okay, let's give this a taste finally. Savory. Extremely savory. And the cohesiveness of the white pepper and the lemon balance everything out nicely. You could definitely make this for anyone, and they would be very happy that they got invited to your dinner party where you're making your top 10 Carnivore Chef recipes. Tacos always need as much flavor as possible, and to ensure that these grilled chicken tacos have that, I'm going to be marinating them. To start, get 2 limes and roll them out to help extract the juice. Split them in half and squeeze as much juice out of them as you can. If you don't want to squeeze, use about 1/4 cup of shelf-stable lime juice. To this, add a couple tablespoons of olive oil or chicken fat. We're using chicken breast, so it needs the extra fat. And for the spices, we're going to go with 1 teaspoon of granulated garlic, an 1/8 teaspoon of white pepper, a half teaspoon of smoked paprika, a half teaspoon of ground cumin, an 1/8 teaspoon of ground oregano, a 1/4 teaspoon of ground chipotle, and finally 1 teaspoon of salt. Give this a mix with your time-tested mixing spoon and taste for seasoning. Mine is perfect like always, so I set this aside and move on to the chicken breast. This is about 1 pound of super thick and juicy chicken breast that I'm going to cut in half so that it cooks faster on the grill. Throw this into your marinade and massage it in with those dirty little hands of yours. Once you're certain that every part of the chicken is coated, set it aside and allow to marinate at room temperature for 30 minutes or a couple of hours in the fridge. While that's doing its thing, let's make some tortillas. I'm going to go with 4 ounces of pork rinds, 4 eggs, and about 1 cup of sharp cheddar cheese. Give me 1 second while I blend this. Peekaboo! It's done and it looks like this. To make these, grab yourself a parchment-lined baking sheet and a small bowl of water. Wet your hands and start rolling out small dough balls and press somewhat flat. Using another sheet of parchment paper, gently press on top to flatten out each tortilla. Once that's done, place them into an oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 7 to 8 minutes or until each tortilla is nice and pliable. After your tortillas are done, it's about time to grill up our chicken breast. Place your chicken onto the grill over some pretty high heat. I'm looking to get some char marks. And if you want to know how long to cook it, just cook it until it's done cooking. About 162 degrees Fahrenheit for those of you with a thermometer. I'm not going to bore you with a bunch of slow chicken flipping motions, so enjoy this sped up chicken curling motion as it cooks. Now that the chicken is done, simply slice it up into strips and bring it over to your other items. I also sliced up some lime and orange for these because it feels more authentic. Also crumbled up some queso fresco for another layer of flavor. Build yourself a taco and enjoy. These tacos are light and tangy. The key here is to not overcook your tortilla. Making sure they're cooked until they're just done will ensure that you have a pleasant chew as well as a light toasty flavor. Hey there, my meaty friends. This is Reed, aka Carnivore Chef, and welcome to this video presented by me and the giant zit on my forehead. I know if you're like me, you go to the Chinese buffet and you're like, oh my god, cream cheese rangoon. What am I doing with my life? I need a whole plate full. It was the best thing on the bar, in my opinion. Still is, besides chicken on a stick. And I don't like to take advantage of either one. But I will say that the creaminess and crispiness of the cream cheese rangoon always keeps me coming back. In this recipe, I wanted to keep it as close as possible to the original without sacrificing too much in the way of flavor or texture. So if you miss these creamy and chewy little bites of deliciousness, here's your chance to make them again. Before we get started, I'm going to get you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share this video with all your friends if you think they'll like it, and most of all, I hope you enjoy it. All right, let's get started. For this recipe, you're going to need cheese on cheese topped with some crab meat. I've pondered the best way to replace egg roll wrappers for a while now. I've even gone as far as trying to make an egg roll wrapper batter, but to no avail. Let's go ahead and get our filling out of the way. In a bowl, add in 4 ounces of cream cheese, waterfall about 4 ounces of lump crab meat. Claw meat is acceptable here too, but not as delicious. We will want to add some flavors to this in the form of onion powder, about a ½ teaspoon worth. Follow this up with a ¼ teaspoon of granulated garlic, and 2 teaspoons of real Worcestershire sauce. Mix this with a rubber spatula or by gloved hand until everything is homogeneous. I'm using the Worcestershire sauce to add a bit of sweetness that you usually get from the American Chinese buffets. This is also the reason that I didn't add any salt. The cream cheese should provide just enough, but feel free to taste and sprinkle any in if you want. Now that that's taken care of, we can go ahead and start making these things. Here I have some provolone cheese slices that are round. Feel free to use the square variety. These are just what I had in my direct reach. Place a non-stick pan over medium heat and allow it to get warm. The idea for this is pretty similar to how you'd use normal egg wraps. I'd go ahead and grab a spatula as well. I threw my cheese on the pan expecting a sizzle, but all I got was a sad sound of silence. The idea is just like making cheese tortillas, except you don't want to flip them. Using your spatula, start scraping up the edges to ensure that they aren't stuck. This will take a bit more time to happen than you think, but once you're able to pull up half the cheese from the pan, we could take a nice sized dollop of our crab cheese and place it in the middle. Fold this and press it in. The first one is never perfect, so come just a little closer and I'll show you one more. Alright, now that you're here, I need to tell you something. The code to the basement is 12687373. When you get down there, you'll be approached by a man named Charles. He will give you a key to a storage unit that's located in St. Paul, Minnesota called Big Bunny's World of Stores and Ages. Slide the key under door 69 and the rabbit will slide an envelope back under the door. Bring this to me and I'll tell you what it says in the comment section. And we're done. I'd say this definitely covers the basis of crispiness. I wanted to dress these up in a nice food tuxedo, so I topped them with some green onions and a fancy little swoosh of sriracha on the side. Every buffet line's wet dream. Let's go ahead and give this a big bite. These were heavenly. I hit my goal of crisp and creamy, but I also hit another marker I didn't know I wanted. Chewy. Something about the chew just made this a much more fun experience. This was a real treat. I suggest this stay a treat because I ate 4 of them before I even turned the camera off. See y'all next time. For the fried pickles, the story changes a little because we need some sort of coating on the outside. Today, I have my trusty dredging station of whisked eggs and ground pork rinds. For the pickles, find some of the best that you can find at your store, or make your own. I don't know Cleveland, nor have I been to his kitchen, but these will work just fine. Start by squeezing some of the pickle juice out before adding them to your eggs. Let the excess drip off a little and then toss them in your pork rinds. It's not a perfect method, but we're shooting for them to look like this. Here's a better look at that wrist action for those of you that really wanted it. Once they're breaded, place them onto a plate or a parchment-lined pan, and now we can bring them over to our hot oil and carefully toss them in. I'm going to be honest, I cooked these last so I was tired of frying things. Please cook these in batches as well until they're nice and golden brown. It'll only take about 3 minutes for this to happen if done in batches. I am certain that the outcome will look a bit better than what I've created here, but these were still delicious. Let these drain on a paper towel lined plate and serve. Hey there, my meaty friends. This is Reed, aka Carnivore Chef, aka Cold Cut Comboer. You ever just wanted a cold cut sandwich but in a different form? Then boy do I have the recipe for you. The taste of ham and turkey with mustard brings me right back to my childhood, and I wanted to recreate that here. I tried to get as creative as possible, so I hope you enjoy it. A quick disclaimer, the cheese sauce I make in the video is not how I want you to make your cheese sauce. Please refer to the written recipe to make a much better and creamier sauce than I did. Anyways, let's get started. Pull out some Colby Jack and sharp cheddar cheese. I won't judge you for buying the pre-shredded stuff. As you'll see here, I have to get creative and shred mine using a mandolin. It's not ideal, but I'm not going to complain. I should have got the pre-shredded stuff. If you're going to follow in my footsteps, please be super careful. I've seen many fingertips lost to these things. Not personally, but from gratuitous amounts of YouTube kitchen accident videos. Next up, let's take care of these deli meats. Feel free to dice yours or tear it. I just took the entire slab and shredded it. I wanted it to mimic the lettuce on a sandwich, so I cut it rather thin to add the volume I wanted. You should give it a little taste to make sure it's ham. Yep, it's ham. Let's do the same for the turkey real quick like. Alright, the next item is optional, but if you can handle it, I implore you to add it. The basil adds such a nice complexity to everything at the end, and it's so worth it. Remove your leaves from the stem, and place all of your small leaves into the biggest one and roll it up like drugs. Slice this into thin strips. This is called a chiffonade. Okay, let's take care of these chips. I suggest you lay down some parchment paper on your baking sheet for this one. I grabbed some fairly inexpensive hard salami that's also probably cut just a little too thick. Lay these out on as many pans as needed. If you find thinner sliced salami, I suggest you cut your cook time by about 2 minutes, maybe even more. But for now, throw these into an oven that's set to 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 12 minutes or until your salami has darkened in color. While those are in the oven, let's make this mustard cheese sauce. Don't forget, the better sauce recipe is in the description. But for mine, I added 2 cups of half and half into a pot set over medium-high heat. I got this to a bare simmer before turning the heat off and removing it from the eye. I added in 2 tablespoons of yellow mustard and then slowly started whisking in my Colby Jack. I seasoned this with a half teaspoon of salt and a quarter teaspoon of black pepper. Alright, by the time this is thickened, your salami chips should be done. And as you can see, I made a ton of them. And yeah, a little floppy, but they're still hot and cooking. I even mine out just a little bit before adding my toppings. Some ham, some turkey, and some shredded cheddar. I place that into the oven that's still warm for about 5 minutes to get the cheese melted. Once melted, I topped it with my mustard cheese sauce. And finally, some basil. Look at how damn tasty this looks. Let's take this first bite, which is for my Patreon community. Oh damn, this mustard cheese sauce is fantastic. It works so well with just everything. And the basil comes through so nicely and makes it just a touch lighter. You'll work well with everything too if you like the video and subscribe to the channel. If we're talking Hooters, we're talking about buffalo sauce. And from everything I've seen, they use a compound butter when they're cooking, which is good because it's easy to make. Break up a half pound of unsalted butter into a food processor. You can also just use softened butter as well, but I didn't have that kind of foresight. Next up, we'll want to add about a half cup of hot sauce. Use whatever you want. I went with something very mild but still delicious. And since we used unsalted butter, we'll want to season it up a bit. Feel free to use salt, but I went with a half teaspoon of smokestack. If you're using a food processor, pulse this a few times to get it started. Then blend on low until everything is fully incorporated. If you're using softened butter, you should just be able to fork your butter into submission. No matter how you choose to make this, just make sure it looks something close to this. We don't need this right now, but it can be made ahead of time. Just make sure people don't know how delicious it is, so they don't use it on all of their cauliflower wings. Someone requested Hooters buffalo shrimp, and I listened. I did not know much about this appetizer, but I saw it and knew it was going to be f***ing delicious. The process is going to be the exact same as the pickles, but with shrimp instead. Drop a tail-on shrimp into some egg, let the excess drip, then toss it in your pork rind crumbs. It should look like this. I think the non-smooth surface of the shrimp helped the pork rind stick better. Set your body to speed/duration of 4000% and bread the rest of these little shrimps. Again, set them onto a parchment-lined baking sheet and bring them over to that skin-melting oil. Just like the rest of the things we fried, you'll want to cook these in batches. The shrimp should only take a few minutes to cook at most and should be golden brown delicious. Just like with the wings, have some of that sauce ready to toss that hot shrimp in. I'll give you a moment to stare into the glistening sauce. Wow, oh yeah. Ooh. Okay, your moment's up and these look delicious. Hey there, my meaty friends. This is Reed, aka CarnivorousChef. I saw a TikTok of someone making chips out of ground chicken, and my initial thought was to turn this into carnivore Doritos. But after looking through my list of videos, I ran across chicken parm. So instead of Doritos, how about I make some chicken parm nachos? Like, why not, right? I'll eventually do a video of the chicken parm the way it should be, but for now, you'll likely dig this. Here comes Gentry walking in with his big old fork. Sup, bud? Sorry, I won't look at you anymore. So the idea is pretty simple. Grinding chicken, or buying ground chicken in my case, and getting it as thin as possible to create chips. A quick note, start with some parchment paper on the table and not cling film. You'll be cooking it on parchment, and I now have the unfortunate job of flipping this later. So slap down your ground chicken and begin to knead it to the width of your parchment paper. It should be about the size of a half sheet pan. If you don't know what size that is, grab a standard cookie sheet and compare it to that. Just big rectangles, that's the goal. So the initial plan was to flatten this out between cling film, but I realized I don't want to cook plastic. I'm not trying to get high here. Here's the flip I dreaded, but I'm happy that it went well. I kept spreading this out till I remember there's a better way to do this. I bet you haven't seen one of these in a while. It's the perfect tool for flattening things out. I haven't made real dough in so long that I forgot rolling pins even exist. So roll this out pretty thin and just press it until it goes past the parchment. You can pull the excess off and fill in any empty spots you have. With 2 pounds of meat, I was left with about 3 ounces of excess. So, in the process of flipping, I somehow made the perfect seam for 2 sheet pans. You should be able to do this naturally since you started with parchment. You did start with parchment, right? Slide these 2 onto your pans carefully. They likely won't break apart sliding them. If you recklessly slap yours down, comment below to let me know how it went. I season each of these up with a half teaspoon of salt, a quarter teaspoon of black pepper, a half teaspoon of garlic powder. Hey friend, I'm gonna need you to leave. And a half teaspoon of onion powder. Place these into your oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 176 degrees Celsius for 25 to 30 minutes or until crispy. I flipped mine for the last 5 minutes of cooking just to make sure the underside dried out a little as well. Chicken parm is usually topped with a red sauce, but we can do better. I basically took the elements of a marinara and made an Alfredo sauce with it. Place a pan over medium-high heat and add in 2 tablespoons of butter, then a quarter teaspoon of black pepper, a half teaspoon of granulated garlic, and a half teaspoon of red pepper flakes. Stir this around and toast your spices for about 30 seconds. The butter should be getting dark, and it's because the garlic is caramelizing. After that, add in 1 teaspoon of Italian seasoning and mix it around a little as well. Finally, add in 1 1/4 cup of heavy cream. Give this a titillating whisk. Reduce the heat to medium and allow to reduce until thickened. Just remember, cream loves to boil over, so don't leave it. Once thickened, turn the heat off and either pour in a half cup of grated Parmesan or grate over fresh Parmesan directly into the cream. 1 more titillating whisk and this should be good to go. Finally, add in about a half teaspoon of kosher salt, but be sure to taste it. Add in more if you think it needs it, but a half teaspoon was perfect for my sauce. Set this aside and it's time to take these crispy babies out. They look like thin pork rinds, which is a good sign. Feel free to cut these however you want. Just know they may shatter, especially around the edges. I took my sheets and made triangular chips out of them, because, nachos. While cutting them up, I kept taking little bites of the shattered pieces. It's wild how much they feel like chips and dry chicken at the same time. The dry chicken part makes sense, but the chips part is still a bit wild, honestly. These are begging for some sort of dip, or marinara sauce. Feel free to use the same pan you cooked your chicken on for this part, but if you have a tiny sheet pan, it lets you stack everything up a bit higher. Place down some more parchment, then some chicken chips, shred over some low moisture mozzarella, and then some Parmesan. And finally, a little marinara. Repeat this until you're out of sauce, but do not skip this last and crucial step, which is grating over as much mozzarella and Parmesan that you're almost uncomfortable with. For me, I could have used the entire half pound of block of each, but I'm trying to show some moderation. Place these back into your oven at the same temperature for about 5 minutes or until everything is melted and has a nice color. I added a bit of chopped parsley out of the tradition of making my food look better. It's wholly unnecessary in my opinion as far as the flavor, but whatever, it looks nice. Let me take this first bite from a Patreon community. Not as good of a cheese pool as I was hoping for, but I was right about the sauce. The sauce plus these chips alone would have been straight up fire. The cheese just adds a bit of nuttiness and creaminess that I enjoy. You can add a bit of nuttiness and creaminess too by liking the video and subscribing to the channel.
Hey there, my meaty friends, this is Reed, aka CarnivorousChef. If it looks like I'm in a dungeon right now, don't worry, I'm not, I'm just in a dark garage. But anyways, in this video, I'm going to show you how to make a dip. I was kind of aiming it towards this big game. I don't know if I can actually say the name of it and be demonetized or not, so I'm just not going to say it. It's a football game that's happening in February that a lot of people want to watch. I had this recipe in mind just for like parties and things like that, and I thought it'd be a good one for that game. It's a super simple dip recipe, but I think people that aren't even on this diet will actually really enjoy this one.
So if you end up making this and you bring it to a party, I suggest bringing yourself some pork rinds and maybe finding some like cheap bread to cut thin and toast it to serve along with it. I think you'll really impress a lot of people. And before we start, I'm gonna get you to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And if you're interested in supporting it, there's a link down below to join as a channel member or join my Patreon community. To start this one, you'll need about 1 pound of shaved steak. If you can't find shaved steak, you can cut either ribeye or sirloin against the grain as thin as you can. And if you really want to go for it, steakums will be my last option, but it's also acceptable. This is some shaved steak that I get from Aldi, and it's usually rather large, so I'm going to have to give it a nice rough chop. And by rough, I mean wide cuts. We don't want this to turn into ground beef. Once it's chopped up, preheat a pan over medium-high for just a minute or two and add in all of your beef. We'll go ahead and season this up with about a half teaspoon of salt. Let this cook for about 3 minutes, mixing occasionally or until most of the pink from the meat is gone. Set aside and pull out a block of Swiss cheese. You can see that it's Swiss by the holes in it. Can you see it? I see it. Grate your cheese however you want, but I'm going to slap mine against a box grater and go to town. You'll want to grate the entire block. Set this aside and let's start assembling. Place an oven-safe pan over medium heat and add in an 8-ounce block of cream cheese. Season this up with 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika, 1 teaspoon of granulated onion, a half teaspoon of granulated garlic, and 1 teaspoon of salt. Start chopping all of this up and then have a brief panic because you think you're burning your cream cheese. Quickly, get the meat into the pan before... Okay, we're fine. Just breathe. When your meat gets into the pan, the little bit of moisture from it should help the cream cheese to melt a little quicker. Just keep mixing this around until you no longer see chunks of cream cheese. Once you're happy with how it looks, add in about 2/3 of your Swiss cheese and mix that in as well. Once it's mixed in, smooth out the top and add the rest of your Swiss cheese to it. Place this whole thing into an oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 11 to 14 minutes or until the Swiss cheese is nicely brown. Get this onto a tray alongside some of your favorite pork rinds and admire your work by giving it a taste. Creamy and beefy is an understatement here. If I was eating bread, I think I could slap this right into a hoagie roll and be fine with calling this a normal cheesesteak sandwich. But alas, I'm more than happy to enjoy it with my crunchy skins. Hey there, my meaty friends. Today I'm making carnivore quiet dogs. Hush puppies. What a f***ing name, huh? Anyways, it's rather easy to make. To a blender or food processor, add in 8 ounces of chicken breast, 3 ounces of pork rinds, 3 eggs, a half teaspoon of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of salt or choice of seasoning blend. I went with Cajun for the record. And finally, either 1 teaspoon of granulated onion or 2 teaspoons of dehydrated onion. Or no onion if you feel like you're going to leave a comment about how that's not carnivore. After it's blended, let's go over to a stove and set up a fry station. For mine, I placed a 6-quart pot over medium heat, then added 1 pound of lard. I'm sure this isn't the best lard I could buy, but at least it's not canola oil. Anyways, let this come up to about 325 degrees Fahrenheit. This took mine about 5 minutes from a cold start. When I don't have a thermometer on me, I like to test my oil by placing a very small amount of what I'm cooking into the oil. If it sizzles, it's ready to go. Mine is sizzling on impact, so that must mean Miss Frizzle and the gang are being scorched right now. Since it is sizzling, we can go ahead and start making balls. And what better way to make balls than go to your local gym locker room at 7 a.m. They're just everywhere, fresh for the picking. This time, I'm going to use a cookie scoop for a nice portion. Try not to overcrowd your pan. Doing that can reduce the temperature of your oil and make it take much longer to cook. After about 3 minutes, give them a flip and rejoice in the fact that they didn't stick. Push all these flip balls to one side and continue making your balls until all of your ball batter has been used up. Cook these hush puppies for about 5 to 6 minutes in total or until you have an internal temperature of 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, these look awesome. They're not as dark as hush puppies I'm used to having, but they are golden brown and glorious. Oops, excuse my paper towel. Stupid, the paper towel ruins the video. There we go, beautiful. Opening one up reveals a fluffy and steamy interior, something I'm looking for in hush puppies when I have them. And for the taste, you know these are good. Shallow frying can definitely be a pain in the ass, but for this, it's worth the effort. Hey there, my meaty friends. This is Reed, aka CarnivorousChef, and in today's video, I'm going to show you how to make pigs in a blanket. These are typically made with hot dogs wrapped in biscuit dough or croissant dough, but we can't have biscuit or a croissant dough. So today I'm going to make these with my tortilla recipe that I used to make enchiladas. It's very soft, a little bit crispy. Use an egg wash to make it a little bit shiny too. These are very easy to make. It's 3 ingredients in a blender along with your choice of hot dog, smoked sausage, whatever you want to use. Before we get started, I'm going to ask you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with everyone that you think might like it. But most of all, I hope you enjoy it. Okay, let's get started. For this recipe, you're going to have to make the critical decision of smoked sausage or hot dogs. I personally picked smoked sausage because hot dogs just aren't very good after the first one. I specifically chose Conecuh sausage for this. Dear Conecuh Sausage Company, if you ever want to sponsor a video, collaborate, or just show off your facility, please email me. It's in my About Me section. Sincerely, one hungry boy. Now, if you're going to use rope sausage like this, you can go with a few sizes. This is the old ding donger. It's a pretty aggressive move, but it'll allow anyone that's truly hungry to feel full. The next size down is going to be our half chub. This is the size I think of when having pigs in a blanket for dinner. And finally, the bashful Billy. Everyone has had those nasty little cocktail smokies covered in cheap biscuits before. Those are the best version for some reason, so I'll be making something similar. Cut your sausage to size and we can move on to our dough. For the dough, you'll need some eggs. Well, 3 to be exact. Set the other 2 aside for later purposes. To that, add in 3 ounces of ground pork rinds, and finally 3 ounces of mozzarella cheese. Blend this on low for about 2 minutes or until a dough ball is formed. Perfect. Bring some parchment paper over to your workstation along with some butter. This dough is very sticky, so I'll be using the butter to help the dough glide off my hands. Take about 1 tablespoon of your dough and press it into an oval on your parchment paper. Now lay your sausage or hot dog on top of it. Pick up your parchment paper and fold the dough to the other side. This dough does a great job at sealing, so you shouldn't have an issue with that. If there's any excess, just pull it off and put it into the next dough ball. Repeat this until all of your dough has been used up. I was able to get about 20 of these mini piggies. There's something about making finger foods like this that puts me into a deep trance. I only ever snap out of it when I'm on the last one. Now that we have all these wrapped up and ready to go, let's get it to shine with an egg wash. Simply crack an egg into a bowl and give it a pretty rigorous forking. If you have a brush each one with a little bit of egg. If not, you could be a caveman alongside me and use your fingers to brush the egg on. When they're all egged up, place them into an oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 to 12 minutes or until nicely golden brown. These turned out even better than I was expecting. I knew this dough would be a better fit than a wet batter, but adding a little bit of egg made it pop. If you're curious about the sauce on the side, don't be. I made it to dip these in, but even good chefs make mistakes. Which this sauce was a whole mistake. Sauce aside, these are really damn good. Good enough for me to suffer 3rd-degree mouth burns. Excuse me while I go cool my tongue off. See y'all next time. We're going to start this recipe with your favorite thing on the carnivore diet, garlic. Go ahead and call this recipe whatever you want. Carnivore, ketovore, keto, whatever. I don't care anymore, as is indicated by this long-winded script entry. I removed garlic jackets by shaking them in a jar before, so I'm going to do the same here. Simply place 2 heads of garlic and begin to for about a minute and be amazed. Doesn't look like it did it this time. Maybe that's because I was only using a couple of cloves before. Whatever, get the jackets off and let's get to roasting. Grab a little piece of foil and place the garlic in the middle. Then add about a tablespoon of lard and a big pinch of salt. Wrap this tightly and place it into an oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about 15 to 20 minutes or until the garlic is nicely browned. While that's in the oven, let's grab our second favorite thing on the carnivore diet, parsley. Roll this up and give it a nice chopping. Set it aside and get out your newly roasted garlic. You know it's nicely roasted when you could do this to it. Now start doing this with all of the garlic so that we have a nice paste. You can also give this a rough chop to help it along if you feel the need to. Next, we can add the parsley and top that with a nice stick of softened salted butter. You don't have to do this part with your hands, so I'll just let you figure out how you want to incorporate this. I just enjoy the feeling of butter in my dirty hands. Once it's nice and mushed together, place this onto a plate or wrap in plastic and set aside. Okay, now for our third favorite item on carnivore, ribeye, or really any steak you desire. Just make sure it's about 1 inch thick. Simply cut about 1 inch by 1 inch cubes. Feel free to use a ruler if you're really into your measurements. Now strategically press the cubes back together into a steak shape, and season generously with salt. The idea behind this is to have nicely browned bites of steak that are browned all over. And the best way to do this that I found is just to cook it like it's an intact steak. Place these steak-shaped cubes into a pan over medium-high heat and sear it for about 3 minutes. You'll want a crust that looks something like this. Flip all the steak pieces and continue to sear on the other side. Push all the pieces to the other side of the pan and add in about 3 tablespoons of the compound butter. Grab a spoon, tilt the pan, and simply baste your steak pieces continuously for about 2 minutes. After that time, you can turn the heat off and top with a little more of that butter. Stir this in and plate it up. Pour that melted butter on top and sprinkle on just a touch more salt. And look at that. We got a nicely browned steak bite that's perfectly medium rare. If you're trying to feed a lot of people this recipe, just do it in batches so you don't end up with this. Hey there, my media friends. This is Reed, aka CarnivorousChef. I'm going to kick off the Thanksgiving holiday season with a super easy side dish, Herb-filled deviled eggs, of course. While I've got you here, why don't you go ahead and like the video and comment down below what your favorite Thanksgiving dish is. With these deviled eggs, I wanted to encompass what I think Thanksgiving tastes like overall. I hope you agree with me when you try them out. I'm proud to announce that I've added a new addition to the van, 1.5 cup mini food processor. Welcome, little guy. So, when I think about Thanksgiving, I'm usually singing that one Simon and Garfunkel song. Sage, rosemary, and thyme, and parsley somewhere. Starting with the thyme, you can use the leaves from the sprig, but you can also use the soft parts of the stems as well. You'll need about a 1/4 teaspoon of these. Next up is your rosemary. Now, it's super easy to overpower anything with rosemary, so you'll need no more than a half teaspoon worth of the stuff. Finally, we can add our sage. I just picked a rather small leaf and threw it in there. I tried to process it a little bit, but it proved to be pointless, so let's just carry on. For this recipe, I just went with pre-boiled eggs. This pack came with 6, so I'll end up with 12 deviled eggs. If you need a good reference on how to boil eggs, comment below and I'd be happy to link you to a great video by Chef John of Food Wishes. All we need to do with the eggs is split them and remove the yolks. You can go and throw the yolks into your blender or 1.5 MFP. Once you get them all in there, we can start to thin this out. Typically mayonnaise is used to do this, but I found that I actually prefer a combination of 3 tablespoons of sour cream, and following that up with 2 ounces of cream cheese. The cream cheese adds the richness while the sour cream adds a touch of tang and wetness. You'll need a half teaspoon of salt, and a 1/4 teaspoon of smoked paprika, which is optional, I just like the flavor. Blend or process this for about 2 to 3 minutes or until you're left with a cooked custard consistency. Looks a bit like this. We could pull our halved egg whites back